Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone is doing well. Hopefully you can hear me okay and the sound is good. Inshallah. So today I'm going to react to a video that was just put out earlier today, just a few hours ago, actually. And the context of this video is that it is basically criticizing me and the kind of critiques that I've made of what I call and what you should call the Harmony with Qawm Lut document. This is also known as Navigating Differences. So I've done like a long critique of this document that is supposed to clarify Islam's stance on gender and sexuality. And I did a long critique of this document. So definitely go check that out. That live stream, we also shortened it into like 45 minutes if you want to just get the highlights of that critique and what exactly is wrong with navigating differences. But this document is being pushed very aggressively to the Muslim community in the West, and now increasingly even in the Middle East and the Muslim world. And so I, put out my critiques the same day pretty much that the document was published. And now, in response to my criticisms, you have people who are criticizing my criticisms and saying that, I've misunderstood or I've misconstrued, I'm disingenuous. So just to cut it short, we're going to get right into one of these critiques from someone named Imam Tom. So let's just start with him and see what he has to say. We'll also look at some of the statements or the defense of this document by another person that we call Hamza Ghair Qat'i. You'll see what he has to say is known as Maqbool. So you've seen him on this channel before. He's the Red Kufi guy. So we're going to look at what he has to say about this document as well. And he has some very interesting revelations to share with us. So we'll have him, his statements, and we'll look at the receipts, inshallah. And then we may have a chance to also look at a clip from Omar Suleiman himself and how he has, discussed this issue over the past, in the past. And we have documented their history on this issue of LGBT and their dark legacy. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and watch that as well. And as usual, we are going to read your comments. So make sure to put in some comments in the chat. If you want to submit a super chat, I ask that you go to muslimskeptic.com directly and just donate the super chat in the donation page of muslimskeptic.com and include your message in the message box, and we'll read it on the air. Bi'idhnillah. Okay, so without further ado, let's look at what Imam Tom has to say.
In late May, I was contacted by the folks who have organized the Navigating Differences document. I was asked to sign it. After I reviewed the content, I decided to sign it. Since then, a lot of people have aired criticisms for this document online and elsewhere, and I would like to take this video to respond to some of those criticisms, which I think the vast majority of which are coming from a place of misunderstanding and hopefully not, but potentially prejudice. I want to foreground this video.
So either it's misunderstanding or it's prejudice. Like that's where the criticism is coming of the document, which that's the only kind of criticism that can take place, right? Because the document is perfect. Why would he sign it if it weren't, just perfectly in line with Islamic morality?
By saying that I have no skin in the game on either side. I am dedicated to the truth. And if someone were to produce evidence for me that I would be convinced by that shows that this statement is problematic or against Islam in any sort of way, that I would happily retract my signature from this document and request that it be done so.
So that's really an outrageous statement that he has no skin in the game. He has no skin. He's independent. He's just a neutral voice. Imam Tom, okay, is quickly becoming the chief propagandist for Yakin Institute. He's becoming the chief propagandist for Compassionate Imams. And he's at Yakin Institute. I don't know if Yakin Institute is paying him, but he is on their, on their team. You can go to Yakin Institute, their team, and Imam Tom is one of their team members. So how do you not have skin in the game if you're with Yakin Institute? So that's like a very funny, ridiculous kind of claim to make.
To date, I have not seen any convincing evidence nor arguments that would warrant that decision. Some people might also say, why haven't I invited critics to come on to a platform, whether it's a stream or this channel or somebody else's channel, to sort of have a quote unquote open discussion? And the short answer to that is that I am not here for your entertainment. I am here to find the truth. And many of the ulama throughout the history of Islamic scholarship have warned against adversarial debate-like scenarios. Why? Because adversarial debate-like scenarios are not the most conducive forum or format to reach the truth. So if I were to go on somebody else's channel or invite somebody to my channel or to the Utica Masjid channel, then we would be in a 1v1 scenario. Egos would likely get involved. That person has an increased stake in not looking embarrassed and not being humiliated, and might even reach for things that are not true in order to defend their argument. And that temptation would be there for me as well. So that's why anybody who's been following my stuff since the very beginning.
So why can't you talk to someone? Like, why would egos get involved? If you're trying to arrive at the truth, you have to talk to people who disagree with you. That's adversarial, right? How can you ever, unless you're just in an echo chamber, you'll have to talk to someone in some context. Maybe it's not on a live stream, but you have to talk to people who disagree with you. So that's adversarial. That's something that, fine, you don't want to talk to me on a live stream. Okay, no problem. But you have to talk to people who disagree with you. And anytime you talk to anyone about anything, ego can play a factor. So this is really just a very lame excuse. And, who's to say that it would be a debate even? Like, you have a perspective, I have a perspective. We come on a live stream, for example. You can come on to this live stream. I've invited all of these guys to live streams before. Not personally. I haven't invited him personally to a live stream, but I'm inviting him now, or in the future. You want to talk to me directly on a live stream? Okay, let's do it. Like, why would that be a debate? We'll just have a good conversation. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're wrong. Okay, that should be easy to determine, right? If you're seeking the truth. So this is a lame excuse.
Since I was a student in Medina, they should know that I do not do debates. I do not do debates at all, even if I recognize the limited utility of debates when it comes to debating kuffar, or debating sort of atheists, or even somebody who's zindiq, someone who's rejecting the hadith, for example, somebody who's trying to change the religion in an obvious way and claiming to be a Muslim. I can understand a limited usefulness to the sort of arrangement of a debate. However, when it comes to two people who claim to be Ahl Sunnah or claim to, or even demonstrate their commitment to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, I do not find debate to be very, very useful, and I shun it. The second thing to note when it comes to why not have a quote unquote open conversation with critics is that many of these social media influencers who are not students of knowledge and are not imams or mashayikh, actually they have a conflict of interest when it comes to their platforms and how they are set up. For those who are in any doubt when it comes to the Utica Masjid YouTube channel, I do not, and I have never, ever seen a single penny from what this channel makes when it comes to ad revenue or any sort of anything. It goes directly to the masjid and to the overhead of what it takes to produce this content for the people who are filming, to the the set and all the equipment and things like that. I have been very, very deliberate to never accept a single penny from anything that comes through YouTube or any sort of social media platform, whether it's Patreon or whatever, because I want to stay independent. I do.
Wait, so is he employed by this masjid, or he gives charity to the masjid? So he's saying that the masjid is getting money from YouTube, the masjid from Patreon, from YouTube, and they pay for overhead. But part of overhead is like an imam's salary. So he's not employed by the masjid, like that. This channel, this video is on a masjid channel, Utica something, or Utica Masjid. That's the channel. You can maybe see that at the bottom. So he's claiming, I guess, that he doesn't get paid by the masjid. So how is he independent? Like, how is he independent of the revenue that the masjid's channel is making? That doesn't make sense.
Do not want to be compromised by sort of an audience of people spurring me on or encouraging me to respond in this way or respond in that way, refute this or refute that, or engage with this person or engage with that person. So you will never see me do such things. And I certainly wouldn't get on for example, a live stream and encourage people to give me sort of super chats or whatever so that I read their comments out loud live. That people who are in that scenario might need to worry about whether they have a conflict of interest or not. However,
So if here I am, do I not have overhead? Do I not have like costs? It's only Utica Masjid that has costs, right? That's providing you with this platform, Imam Tom. So I have a conflict of interest because I'm making so much money from super chats. I'm just breaking the bank with money that's just pouring in, money that's just pouring in. And but you're independent. You have no conflict of interest, working with Yakin. And every other video on your channel or on this Utica Masjid channel is a defense of Yakin Institute and your buddy relationship with Compassionate Imams. Yeah, there's no conflict of interest there. You don't benefit from those relationships that you have with those figures, right? When Yasser Qadi invites you, to his stream, or Omar Sulaiman, that's just out of the goodness of your heart, right? But anyone who asks for super chats, that's a conflict of interest. So just look at the logic here. Everything that he says is a self-refutation.
I have no such conflict of interest. When it comes to criticisms of the document, I have gone through many of the criticisms that people have waged or levied at the document, and I have grouped them into categories, starting with the most significant and then trailing down to those of lesser significance. So when it comes to the most significant criticisms of the document, or the ones that might seem to have the most validity, they circulate around the idea of understanding who is speaking through this document and who is being addressed, and therefore what the purpose of this document is. We'll take those one at a time. So when it comes to who is speaking, there were several flaws of reasoning or erroneous reasoning practices that were going on. Some people, they dismissed the document and they succumbed to their own prejudices simply by scrolling down to the bottom of the screen and viewing some of the signatories. So they would call it Yasser Qadi's document, or Omar Sulaiman's document, or Jonathan Brown's document. But they didn't show you some of the other people who signed it, such as Professor Abdullah ibn Hamid Ali from Zaytuna College, or someone such as Sheikh Dawood Walid. If the assumption is that we can just go and cherry pick some of the names from the bottom and we can tell what this document is about and we can dismiss the document wholesale, then why wouldn't we go to those, or how do we account for the existence of signatories of people who have politics very, very different from those individuals who are being cherry picked and paraded around as somehow representative of the document? I shared a stage with Sheikh.
It's not cherry picking to say that this is Omar Sulaiman's document and Yasser Qadi's document. That's not cherry picking, because those are not only the most prominent names in the first batch of signatories, number one. Number two, as soon as the document was published, those figures, Omar Sulaiman, Yasser Qadi, were the first to push it out and promote it. And number three, they themselves admit that they're the writers of the document. Yasser Qadi says that I wrote this document. I worked with these people. I worked with Omar Sulaiman. I worked with Hatem al-Hajj to write this document. They say that. They admit it. So we're not cherry picking from the names and saying, oh, this is Omar Sulaiman and Yasser Qadi's document. I'll bring up the post right now so you can see what Yasser Qadi says. Okay. Okay, can you see this, or is it too small? So he says, after many weeks of working with a number of prominent scholars in North America, we have jointly written a statement of monumental importance. It was my honor to work hand in hand with Dr. Hatem al-Hajj and Omar Suleiman and others in writing and rewriting this document with the help of others, with the help of many others. So why does Yasser Qadi name those names? Why does he? So I didn't cherry pick and say, oh, these are the writers. And I just made like a, exaggerated claim about who's responsible for this document. Yasser Qadi, when he announced the document, he admits that I and Hatem al-Hajj, Omar Suleiman, and others were the writers of this document. So he's the one who is highlighting these names and these figures. Okay, back to the video.
Dawood Walid for the first time at ICNA just the other week. And he was blasting the left and the political left and the Democratic Party from the stage. And he has no scruples in doing so. And the same with Dr. Abdullah Ali, is that he is somebody who's an outspoken critic of the left. We also have people like Ustad Mubin Vaid. We have people like Dr. Sharif At-Tubri, people who have been speaking out against the LGBTQ agenda since the beginning. Okay, so it is not possible to simply go to the bottom and cherry pick names and try to make it look like this document is represented by some of the names, and therefore you don't have to take the arguments seriously. That is sloppy reasoning, and it is
no one made that argument.
It's not a valid argument. Further,
no one made that argument that, oh, there's someone's name on it, Yasser Qadi's name is on it, Omar Suleiman's name is on it, therefore it's an invalid document, or Jonathan Brown's name is on it, therefore that's the only thing that we consider in invalidating the argument. No, we look at the contents of the article, of the statement. We critique it on that basis. That's the substance of the argument. But the fact that you have these figures who have a long history of going against going in favor of LGBT politics, supporting LGBT rights, allying with LGBT groups, they have a long history of that, and they've defended it tooth and nail for years. If they're signing a document, then that is cause for pause. That is a cause for, what's going on here? What's really the case with this document? Yeah, of course you have to actually read the document. That's what we've done. We've gone through it and we've showed exactly what's problematic about it. And the thing is that the document does not contradict. The document does not contradict exactly those criticisms of those figures, people like Jonathan Brown or Omar Suleiman or Yasser Qadi. The document is perfectly in line with their past deviance, with their past missteps and mistakes and treachery on this issue. That's the reasoning here, and it's valid reasoning, Tom. It's not invalid reasoning. So this. It's very bizarre. And then bring up Dawood Walid, right? Dawood Walid, oh, he's like so opposed to the left. Like he's such an enemy of the left wing, which is just laughable. It's like a big joke. Dawood Walid is, here's some receipts on how opposed Dawood Walid is. First of all, he's like Zaydi Shia. Okay, Dawood Walid is Zaydi Shia. That's a fact that everyone should be aware of. But he's look at Dawood Walid and his right wing. He's so right wing, as if like that's how we determine what's right or wrong. If someone's on the left or the right, or like this is showing some kind of balance or objectivity. We have signers who are on the left and signers who are on the right. Therefore, good chance that this is an objective statement. Look at Dawood Walid's support. CARE Michigan leader defends Ilhan Omar. Calls for support amid climate of anti-Muslim bigotry. Who's this? This is Dawood Walid right here, defending Ilhan Omar. He's with CARE. He's like CARE Michigan. He was. I don't know what he is, if he's there with that. What's CARE's politics? CARE is extremely left wing. CARE is so left wing that they have queer board members at some of their offices, like board members. I don't know now, but in the past, definitely they've had LGBT board members. They've been defending, reproductive rights, pro-abortion, pro-LGBT. Like, that's what CARE is, and Dawood Walid has been a part of that. Another example. Oh, look. Wow. The politics of Dawood Walid are so different than everyone else on this document. Here he is being arrested because of his capital protest for some migrant issue, some democratic issue with Omar Suleiman, Linda Sarsour, and Dawood Walid, Zahra Billu, this other CARE director, sitting knee to knee. Here you can see in one of these pictures, sitting knee to knee with Zahra Billu. His politics are so different than everyone else. So this is a joke. So yeah, I mean, let's not just make this. There's so many other examples of Dawood Walid's politics. Oh, sacred activism. Like, do you know Dawood Walid was supposed to be at that migrant protest with the water rituals alongside Omar Suleiman? Like, he was supposed to be a part of that. For some reason, he missed it. I think he was sick, but he announced it like on his page. They were defending it. These compassionate imams were defending the migrant march, and then he chimed in the comments that, yeah, I was supposed to be there too, but I missed it. So that's how different Dawood Walid's politics are from Omar Suleiman and these other guys. So someone's asking, Zaydis are not Shia? Okay, whatever you say. Zaydis, Zaydis are not the same as Ithna Ashari Shia, but they're Shia. Yeah, I'm just pointing that out. Like, I'm just pointing it out. Is that like something that's a problem for you guys? So yes, Zaydi Shia are closer to Sunnis than any other Shia group. Absolutely, that's true. But he's still Zaydi. I mean, is that if he has a problem with people saying that, then he can deny it. He can deny that he's public. He can publicly deny that. But this is not just something that we're making up. Okay, back to the stream. Yeah, and then other people that Tom is mentioning, like Sharif, Mubin, Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamid, Ali. So, I mean, these people, my opinion, they're being used, they're being used by compassionate imams. And it's unfortunate that they're being used in this way. I'm very clear. I've been clear about this to them. But I'll even draw you like a nice little diagram that will help you better understand like the dynamics. Let's see, what's the best way to draw on stream? Because I want to draw you a nice diagram that will help you understand like the dynamics here. Let's see, let me get a pen. This should be good. Okay. Okay. Microsoft Paint, good old Paint. All right, so let's think of this as the spectrum here. This is a spectrum, and on one side of the spectrum here, you have like the rainbow stuff. You have, people like, we can say, who's a good representative? We can say people like Ilhan Omar, or let's just type it. like Ilhan Omar. You have people like that Scottish politician Hamza Yousaf. You have other politicians like Rashida Tlaib. Okay, you get the picture. Like these are hardcore LGBT activists. In the case of Hamza Yousaf, he even says that it's perfectly moral, that same-sex behavior is perfectly moral. So this is one side of the spectrum, right? Then, and increasingly, unfortunately, you have some Muslim youth in this area too, who are saying, yeah, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong. Two men loving each other. Love is love. That's on this side of the spectrum. Then you have activists a little bit further down the line. You have someone like Linda Sarsour, for example. You have Omar Suleiman. So they don't go to the same extent as the Ilhan Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs. They don't go to the same extent, right? Because they don't say that it's halal. I don't think Linda Sarsour says that. And Omar Suleiman definitely doesn't say it, that. He says the opposite. He says haram. Same-sex behavior is haram. He says that very clearly. So you have people like Linda Sarsour, Omar Suleiman. Maybe a little bit more to this side is Yasser Qadi. Okay. Because Yasser Qadi says, like, yeah, it's haram. He even says, like, recently he had like a khutbah that we'll talk about inshallah as well, where he's like saying, this is munkar, this is fahisha. Okay, great, mashallah. But like Linda Sarsour and Omar Suleiman, he says, well, we have to ally with them. We can ally with them on common ground. We can ally with Qawm Lut politically. And in the past, he said that Muslims can support their rights. Initially, he said Muslims should support their rights. Then he backtracked, Muslims can support their rights. And he hasn't really made a clear statement. Even in his latest stuff from this month, he hasn't made a clear statement that no, it is haram. Muslims cannot support Qawm Lut rights. Muslims cannot support LGBT rights. He's never said that in a clear-cut way. He's spoken against it, but he's never basically said that Linda Sarsour, Omar Suleiman, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, etc., Dalia Mujahid, some of the people that are working with him very closely, Jonathan Brown, they're wrong. They're wrong. What they're doing is haram. This is actually worse. This is zandaqa. This is like deviance. He's never said anything like that, which is the correct truth about the issue. So there's Yasser Qadi here. I forgot Jonathan Brown. We should add him. Jonathan Brown is here as well. This is like, this area is supporting LGBT rights and allyship. Here, let me add those labels so that's easier to see. Full blown Qawm Lut support is there. And here you have support Qawm Lut rights and ally with Qawm Lut is allowed. So that's that faction. Okay, then you have, so before filling in the rest, what's on this other side? On this side you have a vast majority of ulama. Vast majority of ulama. In the present day, like, forget about historically. Okay, you have, why? Because they're following the Quran and Sunnah, they're following the Dawah and the Sunnah of Lut alayhi salam, of Prophet Lut. So the vast majority of ulama, du'at, everyone basically is all the way on this side of the spectrum. And what do they say? This is what they say. We must oppose Qawm Lut. We must oppose them. Why? Because if we don't, society is going to be destroyed. And that is the correct position. We oppose Qawm Lut. No allyship, no rights support, opposition to rights, opposition to agenda, and what else? There's something else. Yeah, basically, you can't just be quiet about it. You have to speak out. So the vast majority of ulama and du'at, you have, Muslim skeptic is obviously here. This is what I've been teaching and advocating, since I've been doing dawah, basically, for a decade. So this is, this is where we are. So then there's space in the middle here. So what do we find? We find a kind of like a bar. Like here. And who's here? These are people like let's see, like Shadi al-Masri. I'll just mention that. Why I mention him specifically, because he was the one who was, appearing with Jonathan Brown on podcasts and basically defending him against criticism. So he's one example, but then you have others who are on this side right here. And what do they say? They say, look, we should not support. We should not support their rights, but, we shouldn't necessarily oppose. And maybe allyship is okay. So this is like a neutralist stance, or like a neutral stance. Now, Shadi al-Masri, I don't know if he's changed his stance on this, but this is what it was in the past. So, if he has actually changed his stance and he said, no, we should oppose them, then we can move Dr. Shadi onto this side of the spectrum. But Dr. Shadi is a signatory on the Harmony with Qawm Lut document. And the Harmony with Qawm Lut document is right here, This is where, let's see, how can I draw this? Right here. Or right around here is Harmony with Qawm Lut. It's wide. It can be interpreted. It can be interpreted in this kind of wide spectrum so that it accommodates people, in this kind of spectrum. You can sign the document and support Qawm Lut rights, or you can, if you think that, okay, we shouldn't support their rights, we shouldn't ally them, you can still sign the document. The language is ambiguous, as we pointed out, to accommodate both. And in fact, I think the stronger interpretation is that it's clearly saying we want to live harmoniously, we want to coexist peacefully, and we recognize your constitutional rights. That's what the Navigating Differences document says. That's what the document says. So then when people see this, okay, so what's the purpose of this wall? The purpose of this wall is that, oh yeah, I forgot to put, Tom is here too. Imam Tom. He's in here. Maybe he'll say some things that people will think he's here. Okay, maybe he doesn't really know where he is. Okay, maybe he's just floating around. But when he assigns the navigating Qawm Lut or the harmony with Qawm Lut document, navigating differences, that puts him in this red box or this red circle, right? The document does not say that Muslims should oppose LGBT rights. Muslims cannot ally with these groups. The document does not say that. In fact, it advocates the exact opposite. It signals the exact opposite, and then it affirms that Muslims affirm their rights, their constitutional rights. And, which includes gay marriage, which includes non-discrimination, which includes, soon it's going to include things like, well, you have to teach this in schools. You have to respect a kind of adoption of children by LGBT couples. All of these things, all of these LGBT rights are grounded in the Constitution, the interpretation of the Constitution. So this is why you fall onto this side of the wall. So what does this wall do? You have Muslims. It's basically blocking people from seeing where the vast majority of ulama actually are. The vast majority of ulama are here. This is the correct stance. But if you take this correct stance, then you have to cancel these people. Or you have to question how much about Islam do they really know? Because they've been advocating LGBT rights for years. They've been allying with these groups for years, and they still do. And they still do. This is not historical. It's still the case. The most recent example, just a couple of weeks ago, you had the ICNA conference. And the ICNA conference in 2022 had this big controversy because they invited Ilhan Omar for the keynote speech, and they praised her and called her a shiro, basically. And that's what spurred us to make that the Dark Legacy video. But then what happens in ICNA 2023 conference? Oh, much better, I guess. You don't have Ilhan Omar there or Rashida Tlaib, but who do you have? You have other pro Qawm Lut people like Dalia Mugahed. Dalia Mugahed is one of the biggest promoters of LGBT in the Muslim community. Why? Because she's being pushed by Yakin Institute, by Omar Sulaiman, by Yasser Qadi. They're bringing her to the ICNA conference. Her organization, ISPU, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, is constantly pushing these left-wing politics, including acceptance of Qawm Lut rights. They have a paper advocating that Muslims should welcome and celebrate the gay marriage ruling, legalization of gay marriage. That's Dalia Mugahed, and she is connected to the White House. She is, she's going to the White House for Eid. She has worked in the Obama administration officially. She's clearly has some connection with the Biden administration. So Dalia Mugahed, okay, we can put her, here. They're all tied to her. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. So how can you say that you're against, Qawm Lut rights, or you have a statement navigating differences, but then you're at the ICNA conference, Omar Sulaiman, Yasser Qadi, and others rubbing elbows with Dalia Mugahed. And she's also the advisor to your organization. She's like faculty, co-faculty on your organization. So this is double speak. This is not consistent. If you are really against this, which you claim to be, then we need to see consistent behavior. They're still not able to distance themselves from these people. Okay. People keep asking, where's Mufti Menk? Mufti Menk is not involved in American politics. He's connected to it, but I don't want to put him on this chart because he doesn't have enough statements about LGBT rights. So, other than that infamous interview that he did. He did a very clear interview where he does mention some problematic things. We have it on the channel. You can go watch it. But to be fair to Mufti Menk, other issues that he has, I don't think I can put him very obviously on this chart. And so far as he's aligned with, some of these compassionate imams, then that's a problem. Anyway, so what is this bar? Well, Muslims who follow the Dawah Mafia, who follow the compassionate imams, they think that this is the spectrum. They think that the spectrum on this issue is here to here. Like this is the spectrum. They can't see past this wall. They're prevented from seeing past this wall. Like when Yakin Institute published their Jonathan Brown paper, they had this excuse that, oh yeah, we published both sides of the issue. We published one side which says support LGBT rights, published by Jonathan Brown, and we also published the opposite argument that we should not support home loot rights. That was by Dr. Shetty. So we covered the whole spectrum. This is the spectrum, this arrow, this red arrow. This is the spectrum. You can be like Jonathan Brown, you can be here, or you can be like Dr. Shetty all the way on this other side. But that's not the spectrum. The spectrum is supporting Qawm Lut, or opposing them, speaking out against them, protesting against them, blocking them. That's the true spectrum, but that's not represented by Navigating Differences or by Yakin Institute or Yakin Institute. Like, that's not represented. Right? So, should I be charitable to people who signed this Harmony with Qawm Lut document? No, it's a problem. Why are you signing it? Why are you signing such a document? Like, why are you being duped again and again? Just like you were duped. Like, sorry, you were duped to go on and defend Jonathan Brown. Jonathan Brown's paper is in support of LGBT rights, and we should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights. That's Jonathan Brown's position. You defended him. You supported him, and I don't see any kind of correction on that. Instead, we see a signature on Navigating Differences. So the way that we view, so that's the thing. Like, when I was criticizing Jonathan Brown's paper on supporting, affirming, and advocating many LGBT rights, I was accused of cherry picking. I was accused of nitpicking and, oh, you're too critical, you're exaggerating, blah blah blah. All of these attacks, and Shadi al-Masri was also part of that. He was calling people who were criticizing Yakin as neo-Kharijite, these hyenas. Like, that's the kind of language he was using. So that's the kind of thing that we saw in the past. And then now, the same kind of criticism. Daniel's exaggerating about Navigating Differences. He's nitpicking. He's completely out of line. There's nothing wrong with this document. Yeah, you people were also saying that Jonathan Brown's Yakin article had no problems. So now people want me to know where's Hamza Yusuf, the other Hamza Yusuf, on this. Again, he hasn't made too many public statements on LGBT rights that I have seen. So I've also where's the wife of Lut alayhi salam? Where's the wife of Lut? So she didn't oppose Qawm Lut. So she's also on this side. Where on this side? So why was the wife of Lut alayhi salam punished? Okay, she was also on this side. So if I am a Muslim and I'm reading the Quran and I'm reading about the wife of Lut alayhi salam, I'd be very scared to be on this side of the wall. I'd be extremely, extremely scared. I don't want to be, I want to make my opposition known. I want to make my opposition known. I'm not going to have harmonious coexistence. Now, does that mean like what some of these signatories were saying that, oh, if you oppose harmonious coexistence, that means you want violence? Okay, we'll actually go into that because that's what Imam Tom mentioned. So we'll talk about it. But everyone understand this? Everyone understand this chart? Okay, so we'll talk about this. There's some benefit in the document that outweighs the compromises. So there are compromises in this document. That's interesting. What are those compromises? Yeah, let's go back to the video.
Furthermore, that is not an argument that we find or a line of reasoning that is not valid when it comes to Islam and the Quran. Because when it comes to Islam, we are for the truth, no matter who says it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually affirms this in the Quran in Surah An-Naml, that's Surah number 27, verse 34, when they're telling the story of Saba and Sulaiman, and Allah Azza wa Jal says, قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها وجعلوا أعزة أهلها أذلة وكذلك يفعلون. So in this particular situation, they're debating whether they need to go to war or not. And the line here, she says, Saba, who is a disbeliever, Saba is a sun worshiper. She is a mushrika. And she says that when people enter into a village, they ruin it. And she's basically teasing out the consequences of going to war, is that the best of those people end up being abased or killed or displaced and whatnot. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not rebuke her due to the identity of who she is or due to the fact that she is a mushrika or a sun worshipper. Allah Azza wa Jal, according to one of the interpretations of the Mufassirin, says, وَكَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. And that is affirmation that what she said is correct. So here we have an usloob in the Quran where Allah Azza wa Jal verifies the thing that is being said without even looking at the identity of the one who said it. This is closer to truth. And this is how people should approach these sorts of issues. If you look at the statement with this in mind,
and this is like a complete straw man. Again, we didn't say that, oh, the signatories, they have this, the signatory is Fulan and Fulan, therefore the document is batil. Like we dismiss it out of hand. That's not the argument. No one is arguing that. No one is arguing that. We're arguing that, look at the document. It has certain statements that are problematic, like living in harmonious coexistence with Qawm Lut. Things like supporting their constitutional rights, those are clearly problematic. And then it has ambiguous statements, and then it has some statements that are good and correct. And the way to interpret the ambiguous statements and the overall tenor of the document is, well, look at who is signing it and look at the history and look at the positions and the views, the active current views of some of these signatories. That's the argument. So you're strawmanning the argument, Imam Tom.
These two things in mind, that we're supposed to look at the statement objectively and not pay attention to necessarily the person who said it, especially since there are people of all sorts of different political persuasions that have signed this document. It is not possible to tell the level of involvement that the various signatories had with this document. You cannot go, there's no evidence within the website, the Navigating Differences website, or the document itself that will tell you who is the brains behind this document, who is the person who crafted the language, and who is merely signing, was pushed in front of them and they signed it. You can't tell. Was it Jonathan Brown who wrote the entire document and passed it to Sheikh Dawood Walid to sign, or was it vice versa? You have absolutely no way of telling that. And so you have to be fair and you have to be objective. And
we do know who worked on it. We do know. They said it themselves. They said that they worked on it. Yasser Qadi said he wrote it and rewrote it along with Hatem al-Hajj, Omar Suleiman, and others. So this is not like a mystery. And the Hamza guy, Hamza Ghairqati, he also came out and said that he was one of the drafters of the document. So He said in his podcast episode or whatever, he said that there are 4 main writers of the document. He was one of them. So who are the other 3? It's probably the ones that Yasser Qadi mentioned. So what I don't understand, is Tom not aware of these posts?
You are left with nothing but to look at the statement itself and judge it on its own merit without trying to dismiss it cheaply by looking at those who signed it. The second issue we're going to talk about, so that was the first, dealing with who is speaking. Now we're going to talk about who is being spoken to, and that is intimately tied to the purpose of this document in the first place.
Oh, also what just came to mind, like you do, like it is a Quranic principle that if someone comes to you with some information, you take into consideration the person who's coming to you. What surah is it in? But Allah says that if a fasiq, if a disobedient person, an openly sinful person comes to you with some news, then verify it. Verify that news that is being brought to you. This is what Allah says in the Quran. So you take into consideration the identity and the history of the person. You don't say, "Oh, I don't care who you are." What is this, Surah Al-Hujurat? You don't take into consideration the person, the identity of the person at all. No, this is contrary to the Quran. You do consider the identity of the person. So it's in Surah Al-Hujurat, and the ayah, is it ayah 6? So we can bring it up. Share this. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق, okay, بنبأ فتبينوا. So a fasiq comes to you with some news, with some information, then investigate, look into it, okay, lest you harm people out of ignorance and then you have regret. Let me expand it. So this is exactly, if you have a document that's being brought to you by people who have had such a bad track record on this issue, on this LGBT issue, then you need to have hesitation before accepting it. You need to verify, you need to do due diligence on the basis of the person who's bringing that information to you. Okay, so these are the people who have told you to support LGBT rights. They're the people who told you that we can ally with them. They've had this kind of zandaqah, this heresy. They've promoted this heresy unapologetically, and they continue to promote it. So if they bring us a document, then yeah, we're going to be, just by virtue of them being involved with it, not only involved, like they're the leaders of it, then yeah, we're going to be hesitant. We have to do our due diligence. And it just happens to be the case that when we do the due diligence, we see that it's highly problematic. In addition to the fact that those people are involved.
Many of the people, in fact, most of the people who criticize the Navigating Differences document, they seemed to have an unmet expectation. They seemed to expect that this document was going to be similar to the scenario when a prophet approaches their people and they are giving inkar, and they are giving a warning and a rebuke to their people to stop their wicked ways and to turn back to repentance. If that was your expectation going into this document, then this document reads as weak. It reads as begging. It seems to be appealing to all the wrong sorts of things, to constitutional rights, rather than engaging sort of the morality of the issue and the faulty grounds upon which they are basing their argument. However, that is not the only type of encounter that we find our prophets engaging in.
Well, we have that kind of assumption about the document because it's in the title of the document itself. The title of the document is what? It's Navigating Differences, Clarifying Sexual and Gender Ethics in Islam. So if you're that's in the name of the title. So do I have the expectation that this document is going to clarify sexual and gender ethics in Islam? Yeah. Yeah, I have that expectation because of the title of the document itself. Right? So They don't say that the document is less than that.
And if you go to the story of the Prophet ﷺ, the seerah, you will find that there were other scenarios in which he did not simply interact with his people in the context of delivering such inkar. One of those scenarios was the Treaty of Hudebia. Another one of those scenarios was the Constitution of Medina itself. And we can quibble as to whether constitution is the proper translation of that word. But however, the important point is that when he got to Medina after the Hijrah, the agreement that he made with the people of Medina, including them, the Jews. If you look at how the Treaty of the Hudebia went down, the Prophet ﷺ was dictating to Ali radiallahu anhu what to write on the document. And he began by writing in the name of Allah, and then he used the title Rasulullah, okay, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the Qurayshi man, who was a disbeliever, who was a polytheist, he objected to this language, and he said, if we believed that you were the messenger of Allah, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion in the first place. And so the Prophet ﷺ instructed Ali radiallahu anhu to cross out his title, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and instead write Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Ali radiallahu anhu, out of his taqwa and piety, was hesitant to do so. He couldn't bring himself to do it. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked Ali to point out on the paper where it was written, since he could not read, and he struck that out himself. Okay, where's the inkar in this document? Where is the bold, strident language in this document? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam crossed out his own title, which he knows that he is entitled to, and relinquished it because it's a political document in which he is being hermeneutic. He has to establish common ground with the other side. Similarly,
he's being hermeneutic. So this, subhanAllah, like now, I mean, this is the thing. They've gotten this kind of backlash against their terrible document, and they keep changing, like, what is the document? What is the purpose of the document? So the first thing that they said, Hatem al-Hajj came out with a Facebook post or whatever saying that, well, this document is, don't take it as a elaboration of Islam's position on gender and sexuality. This is for parents to give to schools so that, parents can take their kids out of schools and avoid them being taught LGBT curricula. That was, the first shift. Now this is the Treaty of Hudebia. This document is analogous to the Treaty of Hudebia. It's a political document. We're just trying to establish a treaty with non-Muslims, with the LGBT. So this is a standard argument that Omar Suleiman has been making from the beginning when we started criticizing him for all of his LGBT alliances. This is the first thing that he pointed to. Oh, the Treaty of Hudebia, the Treaty of Hudebia. See, you can have agreements with non-Muslims. And, I've pointed out in the previous stream everything that's wrong with this kind of argument. Like, you're having a alliance with, it's not a real community. Like, these are the people who are pushing all kinds of fahisha. Their whole identity is on the basis of fahisha. Like, you can't align with them. You can't collaborate them. You can't have a alliance with them. So that's point number one. Point number two, like, if this is really like a treaty, if this is really like some kind of sulh between communities, why do you not indicate that in the title of the document? You're saying that this is clarifying Islamic sexual ethics. That's the title. So how is that a treaty? How is that an agreement? And second of all, like the bigger point that he is conveniently overlooking is that in the Treaty of Hudebia, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that phrase was crossed out, but the Treaty of Hudebia did not allow a violation of Islamic norms, right? The clear teachings of Islam were not violated in that document. Not mentioning that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah, that is not a contradiction of Islam. The document didn't say, oh, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not the messenger of Allah. Do you see the difference? But this document is saying that Muslims are supporting the constitutional rights of LGBT. That's a violation of Islam. That's a violation of Islamic ethics. And that's exactly what Muslims cannot do in any kind of agreement. Muslims cannot make that kind of compromise of live and let live in that kind of in that kind of way. So that's the bigger failing of this document. It's an actual violation of Islamic ethics. And so it's not analogous to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah in many ways. So if it's not, it's saying that this document is claiming that it's about sexual ethics, and they have a section in the document clearly saying Islam's position on sexuality and gender, but there's no inkar. There is inkar of same-sex behavior. Okay, God explicitly condemns sexual relations with the same sex. So there's inkar. So why is that included, Tom? If there's no inkar, right? So that is inkar of same-sex behavior. But that's not the extent of, and this is exactly what Yasser Qadi and Omar Suleiman just say this over and over again. Yeah, gay sex is haram. That's important, but that's not the issue. The issue is the allyship, its support for their rights, its support for gay marriage. That's the issue. And the document has nothing to say about that other than support. So it's not just that it's deficient in not meeting some expectation. It actually violates Islamic ethics. Like, that's the problem. That's the critique. So Imam Tom is strawmanning the entire point. He's strawmanning the entire point of our critique. Yeah, and also, like, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is not this analogous to our situation at all. In so many ways. Like, it's not. The other thing that is being missed in this entire discussion is that the Navigating Differences document is being spread like around the world, and you have it being translated, and you have the friends and other speakers, other du'at of the Compassionate Imams in the Muslim world who are now pushing these same lines. They're saying, live and let live. We need to live and let live. And we shouldn't oppose LGBT rights. There are people, there are du'at in the Muslim world who are now advocating this on the basis of this document. So this is where is the how is this a compromise with Qawm Lut? This is spreading the dictates of Qawm Lut to the Muslim world. It's basically entrenching their control, entrenching their rights and their power by saying, we acknowledge, like, we want to live harmoniously with you. We acknowledge your constitutional rights. Well, these rights are being spread. They're being spread to the Muslim world. They're being spread in the West as well. They're expanding their rights. So this is just so off.
When they put together the Constitution of Medina, there was no inkar in the Constitution of Medina. It was a political document in which the people who are migrating to Medina and the Muslims were going to detail the terms upon which they would live together and peacefully coexist. And we'll get to that in a moment.
Now, this is also a mischaracterization of the Constitution of Medina, because the Constitution of Medina, the tribes that were in Medina, including the Jews, had to agree to the authority of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So again, this is nothing like this document. Like the opposite. Like, this document is saying that we acknowledge the authority of the Constitution, which, by the way, supports all of these Qawm Lut rights. So it's shocking, like, the level of twisting an Islamic concept or the Sunnah or the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to defend what is trash.
The sin of Quraysh, of course, was worse than the sin of what many people in our society are going through now. Shirk is the absolute worst sin. It's far worse than liwat, okay? And the hujjah applied to the Quraysh. They understood that this was a genuine prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They understood, they were watching as the Quran was being revealed to them. They were seeing miracles in their life. And in our time, there is no hujjah that is like this. You cannot compare the level of hujjah applied to the Quraysh to the people who are living now. So is it reasonable to expect inkar and bara'ah and this sort of bold, strident language from something which might perhaps be simply a political document, simply a political.
One thing that he's saying, like he's comparing the Quraysh, is the comparison between Quraysh and modern day Qawm Lut. Like, are the modern day Qawm Lut, are they like strict monotheists? They're mushrikeen as well. They're mushrikeen, they're kuffar as well. So like what is this?
Perhaps be simply a political document, simply a political statement, something that is closer to trying to come to a common word. I would posit and assert that it is an unreasonable expectation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, furthermore, in the Quran, He uses common ground when He addresses the kuffar, and especially if those kuffar are from the people of the book. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا, to the end of the ayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to specifically say, "Oh, people of the book, come to a common word, kalimatin sawa'in, a common word between us and you." Is finding a common word between two people, one of which is on truth and one of which is on falsehood, is this something that is against Islam? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do it in this particular ayah. Even the content of what he's calling them to is something that they would agree to, because the Christians that are being addressed in this verse would not understand themselves to be violating Tawheed. They understood themselves as monotheistic. They did not accept the idea that worshiping a three-person God was something that violated Tawheed. And yet, even though we disagree and reject that understanding of Tawheed, we say that that is phony, that is false, that is wrong, still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to come to a common word. So how do we understand this?
And this is exactly what these compassionate Imams have said to justify their allyship. So Imam Tom, maybe I was wrong about where he is on the spectrum, right? Because I said that he was closer to the wall, but he's justifying allyship. He's saying that, well, let's come to a common word. Let's come to a common word with Qawm Lut, and we can, work together. So this kind of argument is given by the compassionate Imams to justify their allyship. There's nothing wrong with coming together for, good causes like poverty or fighting for immigrants or whatever. So this is exactly the kind of justification. But as we've said many, many times, okay, not just this year, since they've been using this argument for years, we've critiqued it for years, that this is a complete disanalogy. Qawm Lut is not like is not like Ahlul Kitab, and is definitely not like the situation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina, or with the Constitution of Medina. It's not analogous to the Treaty of Hudebia for the very various reasons that we've already explained. So this is not valid. Like, these are, according to the Ahlul Kitab, yeah, they are kuffar, they're committing shirk in certain cases, but the Sharia acknowledges their rights, to practice their religion even when Muslims are in control. So allyship with a Christian group or a Jewish group, that is not on its face un-Islamic. But if you have a group that's defined by just by fahisha, and it's not just fahisha, because they're constantly attacking Muslims, right? They're constantly, part of their entire identity is an attack on religion, is an attack on these kinds, what they call heteronormativity. This is what that group is about, and that's why we see them pushing it on schools. They're pushing it on all of these masajid, on churches, on synagogues. They're pushing it on every group, basically. So how is that analogous to Ahlul Kitab? Or even Quraysh? Even Quraysh. So there's so many disanalogies with what he is describing. And the other thing is that Ahlul Kitab is not trying to change our religion. Like, Ahlul Kitab, to come to a common word, they're not trying to change the religion. LGBT is. Qawm Lut is trying to change the religion. They're trying to reform Islam to accept their lifestyle, to accept their rights. And that's what is causing so many Muslims to be confused on this issue. That's why you have so many youth who are, this month, they've put a rainbow flag in their profile pictures. Why is that happening? It's because of this confusion that's being caused, this kind of nonsense that's being caused. There needs to be inkar. There needs to be clear cut. No, this is wrong. We do not support this. So,
document with a proper understanding. This document, as was later clarified by the architects of this document, was designed for school boards. It was designed for teachers. It was designed for principals. It was designed for superintendents, and it was designed for employers. If you are an employee or a student or a teacher, and you are at a school in which you are being forced to participate in some sort of pride activity, this document was made for you so that you could come to your employer or your school board or what have you, and use this to eke out a little bit of space for yourself to maintain your dignity and keep to your faith and not have to participate in these sorts of activities. And this indeed, in the days and 1 week plus since this document has been signed and issued, has been.
So again, what is the real purpose? Now they're saying, oh, you have this document. The purpose of it is you show your school, you show your employer. We don't want, we don't want you to be forced to participate in any of these activities, Pride Month activities. So just think about it. Did it just happen? Did it just start that these companies and these schools are pushing Qawm Lut, rainbow stuff on Muslims in the workplace, at schools? Did it just happen? Is it just happening this year? No. Okay. It's been a long, slippery slope. It's been a long progression of other rights that have been granted by these governments, by these liberal governments. And over a decade, over 2 decades, we have now gotten to the point where schools are pushing this on children. Actually, that's been happening for more than just this year. That's also something that's been happening for the past 4 or 5 years. Pushing it on employers, that's also been happening for 4 or 5 years. But the point is that this is not new. This is not new. It's been a progression. And what's so problematic is that the people who are pushing this document have also been pushing those other rights. Those other rights. They've basically said, yeah, we have no problem with gay marriage. We have no problem with LGBT non-discrimination. We have no problem with LGBT employment rights. We have no problem. All of these rights have been defended by these compassionate imams, by his boss at Yakin Institute. All of them have been defended, either explicitly or implicitly. And that's what these documents are. The Yakin Institute article is about. The statements of Jonathan Brown have been about. The statements of Yasser Qadhi have been about. We've compiled all of that history, all of their statements in defense of those rights. So when you acknowledge all of those rights, then you get to a point where, okay, now we have the right to teach your kids. We have a right to fire you if you don't agree at your place of work. Now they're like, oh, here's a document. Here's a document. Just use this. This will save you. Just show this document to your employer, because as soon as your employer sees the name Yasser Qadhi, oh, okay, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to fire you now. I'm not going to force you to participate now. I see Yasser Qadhi's name there. Like, what world are they living in? But the point is that this is too little, too late. It's too little, too late. Even if this was the purpose of the document, which is questionable. Maybe it is. Maybe that was one of the purposes of the document. Is print this out, print the 3 pages, 4 pages, with 5 pages of signatories or however many signatories. Print it out and give it to your employer. Say, oh, I can't, go to the Pride parade because, it's against my religion. You couldn't say that, like, it's as an employer. Like, anyway, I have a hard time believing that anyone would actually use this document in that way, but maybe people are so weak. Some of these fans of the Compassionate Imams are so weak that they literally have to print something out like this to abstain, or even in school. So Anyway, the point is that the document is acknowledging all of these rights, but it's just drawing the line like a very small sliver, like, oh, we just want this, we just want to have an opt-out option, as if that's going to make a big difference for you at your place of work or for a kid at school. Like, oh, we just want to opt out of this, but everything else we've already, co-signed.
been borne out by how people are using it. If you look and you follow on social media, various Muslims are quoting it, they're referring to it, and they are using it for exactly these purposes. When they want to get out of something or they're not happy at the institutional suffocation and imposition that is going on, they are referring to this document and using it as it was intended to be used. Now, I will grant that it is a valid criticism that this is not clear enough, that the purpose of this document was not made clear enough from the beginning. If you go to the Navigating Differences website, all you have, it just goes right into the statement itself, and it doesn't prep you as to what the purpose of this document is. And I think that that is a valid criticism. I think that it would have been better, and inshallah, they can still do it, to make either a splash page for the website or to put at the top of the website that this is what this document is intended for. It is not intended to be addressing the abominations or the people performing abominations and sexual indecency, and to sort of give a moral rebuke to what they're doing. It is not that type of document at all. And so,
but it does. It gives a moral rebuke. It says that God condemns same-sex behavior. It says that. So it gives it gives a moral position. The critique was that it doesn't give a complete moral position. It doesn't properly represent the entirety of Islamic ethics on this issue. So again, like, he's strawmanning the criticisms of the document.
To enter into reading this document with those sorts of expectations are not valid and will set you up for disappointment. The next criticism had to do with appealing to constitutional rights. And the idea here was that if we appeal to the constitutional rights, it means that we are affirming the rights that they think that they're entitled to by the Constitution itself. A sub-point that can be tied to this argument was that the way things are going, courts will expand LGBTQ rights, meaning that if we appeal to constitutional rights, we are not only accepting all their current rights, but also their future rights as well. This criticism is factually wrong, and it misrepresents the current historical moment. Let's go first to how it is factually wrong. First of all, the Constitution is not an LGBTQ-friendly document. Full stop. If it were an LGBTQ-friendly document, then there would be no need to reinterpret it in the first place to further their agenda of what they call rights, quote unquote, which is what they're trying to do. There would be no need for the Equality Act to be brought into Congress, and still it is failing, alhamdulillah, but there would be no need to do all of this, okay? It's not.
What is he talking about? Like, the Constitution is not an LGBT friendly document. What does that? The Supreme Court disagrees with you, buddy. The Supreme Court disagrees. The Supreme Court says yes. Like, he doesn't understand what Supreme Court interpretation is of the Constitution. The Supreme Court determines what the Constitution means. So the Supreme Court says that, look, we have religious freedom, we have non-discrimination. I believe it's the 14th Amendment. And this non-discrimination applies to sexual orientation. That's what the Constitution has made the law of the land. So the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution in that way. So when you say, I acknowledge the constitutional rights, yeah, the constitutional rights as understood and determined by the Supreme Court. So now is he saying that, when we write respecting the constitutional rights in this document, we're referring to the Constitution as understood by Thomas Jefferson, the original meaning of the Constitution 200 years ago, not... Well, guess what? The original meaning of the Constitution didn't have room for Muslims in it either. Right? If that's the interpretation that we are beholden to. But the Constitution, as it's understood today, as it's been understood since 2015, is that it supports, or it gives this right to gay marriage. It gives all these non-discrimination rights based on sexual orientation, based on gender identity. So if you identify as a certain other gender, blah, 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 then we have to respect that. That's what you're committing Muslims to. Like, that's the problem. It's what the Constitution says now. What the Constitution says now is what the Supreme Court has ruled and has said now. That is what you're committing Muslims to. So this is why it is a pro-LGBT document. And that's how someone like Jonathan Brown would interpret the document. If he wasn't explicitly or directly involved with the document, it's written in a way, the document is written in a way to preserve his position on Muslims affirming and advocating many LGBT rights. This is the problem with double coding, being ambiguous in the language or being vague in the language, but it's still clearly in defense of these specific LGBT rights, the ones that have been determined to be constitutional since 2015, 2016, and hence from then onward.
True also that LGBTQ rights will inevitably expand. This is a false sense of how history is moving. We have recently seen how Catholics have spent decades lobbying and building capacity and putting judges into place where that they were able to overturn Roe versus Wade. There is no sense. And in fact, it is up to this.
So according to Imam Tom, it's false to think that these LGBT rights are going to be expanding. This is a false sense of history because look at what's happening with Roe v. Wade. It was overturned because of years of advocacy and protest from the Catholics. So, the overturning of Roe v. Wade shows that there's no reason to expect LGBT rights to expand. Oh, that's nonsense. What a crazy thought to even have. So, first of all, look at the kind of gymnastics that he has to go through. Second of all, completely out of touch with reality. Second of all, the Catholics were advocating and protesting against Roe v. Wade for decades, for 50 years, pretty much. Where has Imam Tom, okay, maybe not him, but where has his bosses at Yakin Institute, where has Yasser Qadi, where are all these people that he's rubbing elbows with, where have they protested like the Catholics have protested? Where have they stood and opposed the proliferation of these rights? In fact, they were carrying water for this lobby, and they were telling Muslims, don't oppose it. Actually, you should affirm and advocate for these rights. We should. Yasser Qadi said explicitly, we don't want the government to say that marriage is only between a man and a woman. We don't want the government to say, we want the government to get out of morality. So that's been the position of his bosses, and the people that he's defending on this document. And he wants to make a comparison with Catholics and Roe v. Wade. And by the way, on the issue of abortion, again, Yakin Institute, their paper on abortion has been used by many liberal feminists to say that the Islamic tradition supports reproductive rights and pro-choice politics. And in fact, in that paper, originally, they've deleted it since we criticized it. They quietly have deleted it in the English version, at least. They had Omar Suleiman included, this glowing defense and promotion of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is, doing a great job. Planned Parenthood, for those that you don't know, is an extreme left pro-abortion organization, the main pro-abortion feminist organization in the United States. And Yakin Institute, you have Imam Omar Suleiman defending Planned Parenthood. So not only have they been promoting the alphabet, Qawm Lut people, they also have promoted abortion and reproductive rights, or allied with their, the main champions of that ideology as well. So now you want to talk about, the history, the direction of history is towards reduction of these left-wing liberal ideas. No, it's just constant expansion, constant increase of their their liberation to do all kinds of fahisha. There was one kind of blip in the overall trend where Roe v. Wade was overturned. Alhamdulillah, that was a good development, but it was the exception that proves the rule.
Supreme Court and the way that the Supreme Court is currently constituted, it might be actually closer to the truth to expect them to perhaps overturn some of the rights, quote unquote, rights that have been given to LGBTQ, quote unquote, community up until this point. Whether constitutional rights entail everything that LGBTQ agenda claims is precisely what everybody across the country is fighting about. It is not a done deal. So that has to do with how this criticism is factually wrong. Second, this criticism misrepresents the current historical moment in which we are situated. The Constitution is constantly being reinterpreted, and we are in fact fighting over this very interpretation. Because
who's fighting? We are fighting over this reinterpretation. Who? The document doesn't fight the interpretation. The document doesn't say that, hey, there's no acknowledgement in the Constitution of sexual orientation or gender identity. We are fighting against this type of reinterpretation of the Constitution. There's nothing like that is coming from these people. The document is not saying that at all. So who is fighting exactly? In fact, you have Yasser Qadi being buddy with someone like Muhammad Fadl, who is this professor from Canada. He's originally from the US. And Muhammad Fadl is actually on the board of an organization, a supposedly Muslim organization, that has been fighting for the reinterpretation of the Constitution to include LGBT rights. The group is called Muslim Advocates. So Muhammad Fadl is on the board of that organization, and he is a Zindiq through and through, a reformist through and through. And Yasser Qadi is like featuring him, Muhammad Fadl, on his channel and introducing such a deviant to the Muslim community and promoting him. Like, fighting against, who's fighting, Tom? Please, I would like to know who exactly from your crew. They've been fighting for the reinterpretation. Because again, Yasser Qadi has said, we don't want the government to determine morality. Like that kind of statement, where is the contrary correction to that statement? If people want to say, oh, Yasser Qadi has changed his views, then okay, maybe Yasser Qadi should come out and say that the Constitution does not acknowledge these rights, and these rights should not be legalized. We do not want LGBT rights. They need to be banned. These kinds of rights need to be banned. We need to overturn gay marriage. We need to overturn these kinds of LGBT rights. Where's Yasser Qadi's statement about that? Where is Omar Suleiman's statement about that? In fact, they're doing the opposite. They're signing this Navigating Differences document that's in support of their constitutional rights, LGBT constitutional rights.
Because the discursive move that the LGBTQ agenda has attempted to deploy, they are trying to expand quote unquote rights by saying that anything short of affirmation and celebration is an existential threat to them, that it implies violence upon them or a denial of their very existence, that it's equivalent to hatred and violence externally, or at the very least contributing to the likelihood that they are going to commit suicide. Within this historical moment, this document, the Navigating Differences document, strikes at the heart of this argument and fundamentally challenges this claim by saying that the tactic they are using to expand their quote unquote rights is not synonymous with having to affirm it, that rejection and moral condemnation, etc., is not equivalent to violence. And that is a very, very important point to attempt to make. And it is within.
Yeah, as I said in the original stream, like, they will make that point. Like, why do we have to acknowledge the entire premise that, yeah, if we not even oppose, like, we don't oppose your LGBT rights, because that's not what anyone has said amongst them. Just saying that we want to teach that our children that gay sex is haram, that's violence. I mean, that's such a ridiculous thing to be accused of. But who is saying that, first of all? Like, if that's what they're saying, then the response shouldn't be like, oh yeah, we of course, we don't have anything but love and peaceful coexistence for you. Like, why would you respond in that way? Why couldn't you respond by saying that this is ridiculous? Like, how can you accuse us of violence? You're the ones who are promoting this and pushing this onto every corner of society. That should be the response. If you have that kind of response, then the inkar is found in that. The inkar of, we reject your agenda. We reject this social engineering, this social transformation. But they didn't include that in the document.
In this context and within this historical moment, that the language of peaceful and harmonious coexistence must be interpreted. It means nothing.
Why is he putting scare quotes around it? Like, that's what the document says: peaceful and harmonious coexistence. That's what the document says explicitly.
More than our objection as practicing, believing Muslims, our objection to the LGBTQ agenda does not mean that people are going to be killed or beaten up. That is all that it means. And to interpret these...
Who said? Why is that all that means? If that's all that means, then why is that not in the document? Why are you using charged language, like very packed language, evocative, suggestive language of peaceful, harmonious coexistence? Harmonious doesn't just mean like, oh, we're not going to violently attack you. That's not what harmony means. This is now your cope. Like, you are embarrassed by this language, so you're trying to massage it into a meaning that is less embarrassing than what the language actually is saying. So, like, does anyone fall for this? Like, only the most blind fanboys and fangirls would take this seriously.
Words in any other context than that is a stretch, to say the least, and disingenuous to say the most. Ironically,
it's a stretch. Like, it's a stretch. When we said we want in our document, and we all signed it, that we want peaceful coexistence and harmonious coexistence, if you interpret it in any other way than this highly convenient way that no one ever disagrees with, no one ever has claimed, no Muslim that I know of in the US especially has said, okay, we need to go and be violent. We need to oppose them by being violent and breaking the law. No one has said that. Okay. If you interpret it in any other way, that means you're disingenuous. You're disingenuous. You're dishonest. It's a stretch. So who's buying this load of BS? This guy is just shoveling BS.
If you don't see this distinction, or you don't register this distinction, you're actually accepting the LGBTQ definition of what it means to peacefully coexist. They're the ones trying to tell us that to peacefully coexist means affirming them. It means celebrating them. And this document and what we are saying is precisely the opposite. Yes.
It's not the opposite. You're just acknowledging the language that they use, and you're not clarifying that, oh, when we say peaceful coexistence and harmonious coexistence, we mean that to be, oh, don't break the law. That's supposed to be something that people magically understand from it. But everyone else understands it as, well, you're acknowledging their constitutional rights. Your actual paragraph about Islamic morality has no inkar. It has no condemnation of their lifestyle. It has no condemnation of things like choosing your gender identity, or choosing your pronouns, or marriage, or the right to marriage. It has anything to do with political rights. You avoid all of that material. The only thing that indicates any kind of political stance is peaceful coexistence. You haven't even signaled something that is politically opposed to them. You've instead signaled something that is politically in favor of them by saying peaceful and harmonious coexistence. Do you see the problem here? But he's saying, no, it's a stretch. Like, you just have to just assume that we don't mean a problematic definition, even though we've given no indication in the document that we oppose their definition of coexistence. In fact, we have acknowledged and endorsed their constitutional rights in this document. So this is not convincing at all.
We will peacefully coexist in the sense that you will not be physically harmed. No one is going to physically harm you, but we reject you. We reject what you stand for. We reject your morality. We reject the practices that you do, building an entire identity around your desire. All of this we reject. And we are doubling down on the fact that this rejection does not entail any necessary physical violence upon you.
Why couldn't the document have said that? Why couldn't the document have said, we reject you? So he's saying, remember what he said earlier, that, oh, this is just a political agreement. This is like the Treaty of Hudebia. Of course, you're not going to include any inkar. But now he's changing his tune. He's saying that what we're really saying is that we reject you. we reject you. We reject everything that you stand for. It's not explicit. It's just, you know, the implication, the subtext. So which is it? Are you really rejecting them? Are you really condemning them or not? This is what I was saying earlier. Like, everything that they say is a refutation of their own words, because they're constantly contradicting themselves. It is a condemnation, but it's implicit, but it's also not going to include condemnation, because there's multiple ways to engage with groups, like the Treaty of Hudebia. And so it's a political statement. It's not a moral statement. So this is very embarrassing.
Of the more minor criticisms that was made in this vein was that, do we have to make a statement about living peacefully with every group? What about gamblers? What about drinkers, etc., etc.? This is a very naive argument, and the people who made this argument should have already noticed that we do not have people constructing identities around these sins or these desires. We do not have people constructing political agendas around these sins and desires. The only thing that made it necessary is that this particular group of people are advocating and trying to make this one particular desire into an identity, and then into an agenda, a political agenda that threatens our very existence as Muslims in the West.
That's why they have this kind of political agenda. That's why we've been saying, people like me have been saying, that this is why we need political opposition. That's why we need to oppose them on the political level. And then what your compassionate imams said, like Yasser Qadi, is like, well, people drink alcohol, that's haram. People drink alcohol, that's haram. So we're not going out and opposing alcohol, so why should we oppose LGBT? Like, that was the argument, actually, that Yasser Qadi was using to justify why Muslims should not have any kind of opposition politically, and maybe even should support or ally with. So now, like, they're using the same exact argument except the inverse, and they're saying that, oh well, this is we are talking about peaceful coexistence with them because they're the ones who actually have, this kind of identity, not people who drink alcohol.
Also, another problematic argument that was offered, that, well, if we're going to go out of our way to say that no harm is going to come to anybody who is part of the LGBTQ quote-unquote community, then this is playing into a stereotype that Muslims are violent. No, that's not true at all. This is responding to their assertion that not affirming their agenda is tantamount to violence itself. Everything.
But your document doesn't talk about violence. This is just what your interpretation, what you're claiming is the subtext or the implication of the document. That's not explicit. Nowhere in the document does it talk about violence. It only talks about peaceful coexistence, which is a very broad term. It's a very evocative term that has all kinds of negative ways that you can interpret it that are contrary to Islam. And given, again, the fact that many of your signatories have advocated exactly the type of peaceful coexistence and harmonious coexistence that involves acknowledging all of their, Qawm rights, allying with them, and so forth, and that's a valid interpretation of it.
Else in this document, almost every other criticism must be understood in light of these reflections. And I think that if you take this seriously, that all of the other criticism, or at least the vast, vast, vast majority of the criticism that has been lobbied at this particular document, collapses under scrutiny and is completely invalid, and examples of poor, and we hope not, but potentially motivated reasoning. Just a few loose ends. There is a lot of conjecture going on as to the motivations of particular individuals. There were claims that the people who made this document were being deliberately vague, that every good thing about this document was simply there insidiously to let your guard down, that this was just PR, and that the history or track record of this individual or that individual indicated a bad motive. And I would like to remind the brothers, and especially the students of knowledge who might have fallen into doubt about this particular document and the people who signed it, that Allah Azza wa Jal criticizes too much conjecture and suspicion in the Quran when he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu jatanibu kathiran min adh-dhann inna ba'da adh-dhanni ithm, that it is not befitting and it's not appropriate for Muslims to have unreasonable and undue suspicion about each other or to pry into their motives. And if you think that the history of an individual or the track record of an individual is enough to determine what they're going to do in the future, then I wonder how you would have treated Umar ibn al-Khattab or Khalid ibn al-Walid or Abu Sufyan or Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl and the many people who actually fought against the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his lifetime, only to come around and accept the truth and be not only people who accepted the truth, but people who were some of the foremost Muslims and defended Islam and helped spread it. Rather, you should remind yourselves of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi an Mu'adh bin Jabal. قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من عير أخاه بذنب لم يمت حتى يعمله. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if somebody finds faults in his brother due to some sin that he committed, he will not die before he has committed that same sin. If you are
SubhanAllah, like so much wrong in just the few statements that he's making here. First of all, like you're comparing these compassionate imams to the Sahaba. The Sahaba didn't persist in their mistakes. They didn't persist in disbelief. They became Muslims. They rectified any kind of problems or sins that they were committing prior to being Muslim. How is that the same as these compassionate imams? The compassionate imams have not rectified. They've doubled down. They've doubled down on all of the same points, all of the same sticking points. Allyship, support of rights, support of these Qawm rights. These are the main areas that they have faltered and they have doubled down on. And this document doubles down on that, on all of that. This is what we've been saying over and over and over again. They continue to work with the same promoters of Qawm rights. They continue to associate with the same promoters of Qawm rights. So they haven't actually reformed. They haven't actually stopped the problematic behavior. They are only continuing it. And in fact, they continue to justify it. In this khutbah, so there's this khutbah that Yasir Qadhi gave that people are saying, oh, this shows how much he's changed and how dare Daniel criticize Yasir Qadhi. And I keep pointing out, guys, that every so often, Yasir Qadhi will put out another khutbah or halaqah and he'll make a very, loud, angry statement. We reject this lifestyle. We reject gay sex, and this is haram. Same-sex behavior is haram, and they're coming after our kids, and there's only two genders. Like, he'll make that khutbah. But if you actually listen to his khutbah, which I just did today for the first time, at the end he says, but we can have a common cause with them, and we can ally with them. We can work with these groups, no problem. That's the whole issue. The whole issue is allyship with these groups. So he's not contradicting his prior positions. He's just doubling down. And, one thing, though, I will be very fair. In that khutbah, which I just listened to a couple of hours ago, Yasir Qadhi does say, he says, I apologize. He actually says, I apologize for being ambivalent. And I give him credit for that. For even saying, I apologize for being ambivalent, I give him full credit for that. I would just say that, look, if you are truly apologetic about being ambivalent, then don't give a khutbah where you're saying that we should ally with LGBT. In the same khutbah, that's the message that you're giving. It's around like the 30-minute mark or 31-minute mark. Why are you saying that? If that's what you believe, like if you are apologetic, if you really want to mend the problems, then why is Dalia Mujahid still teaching at your seminary? Why? Like, what? This is the ambivalence or the ambiguity. You're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You're giving the wrong impression. So we want to see a true correction. A true correction of this type of behavior, not just lip service. So even this khutbah that the fanboys are like, oh, see, Yasir Qadhi, oh, wow, this amazing khutbah. No, like the main issues, like you can go to my video. Okay? I did a video on Yasir Qadhi. He refuses to say 5 words. I'm not going to tell you what those 5 words are. You have to go and watch the video. It's on the Muslim Skeptic channel. Yasir Qadhi refuses to say 5 words regarding LGBT. And that criticism is still applicable. He still refuses to make it a clear statement. Again, look at the chart that we had. And this chart, take a screenshot of it. Okay, look, we must oppose Qawm Lut. We will not ally with them. It is haram. It is impermissible to ally with them. And we make bara. We disassociate from them and anyone who supports them. And we do not support their rights. We're opposed to their rights. We're opposed to the proliferation of these rights. We're opposed to their agenda in all spheres, not just when it comes to our public schools, in all spheres. That's the correct position. Until these compassionate imams start saying this openly and publicly, then they're not with the vast majority of ulama. They're not with the vast majority of du'at. They are these outliers. They're these outliers who like to present themselves as if they represent, scholars. They represent the ulama. No, they're the outliers, and we're not going to pat them on the back and say, "Oh wow, great khutbah." So there's some other very interesting statements. Let me just... also the other thing, the hadith that he's mentioning, that Imam Tom here is mentioning. Let's play that one more time.
People who accepted the truth, but people who were some of the foremost Muslims and defended Islam and helped spread it. Rather, you should remind yourselves of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi an Mu'adh ibn Jabal. قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من عير أخاه بذنب لم يمت حتى يعمله. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that if somebody finds fault in his brother due to some sin that he committed, he will not die before he has committed that same sin. If you are accusing others of being hypocrites, then it is feared for you that you will not pass away until you are bit by hypocrisy itself. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for cool heads, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the ability to look at things objectively and to not be swayed by motivated arguments or bias or prejudice against anybody, regardless of who they are and their track record, that we can look at these things in an objective way and evaluate them. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assist us. This is an all hands on deck moment. And I've said this before in other platforms. The issues that are happening, you see what's erupting in schools around the country. Go and read up on the Equality Act. And if it were to pass, what sort of existential threat it would pass to Muslims and people of all religions in the United States of America.
Yeah, all hands on deck was 6 years ago, bro. All hands on deck was a long time ago. The people that you're working with now told us, stay away from that fight or actively support the other side. So now it's all hands on deck. Okay, whatever you say. But this hadith that he referenced, so he translated, whoever finds fault with his brother because of a sin. That's the way he translates it. But what does this hadith actually say? Okay. Man ayyara akhahu bi dhanbin. So he translated whoever finds fault. Okay. But the ayyara, whoever shames his brother for a sin, he shall not die until he himself commits it. So finds fault. Okay, but what does this hadith mean? Because does this mean that we can't find fault, meaning call out munkar? We can't call out a public sin. We can't call out someone is doing some kind of open fahisha or lying or distorting the religion. We can't call it out. If we call it out, then we're going to die. We won't die until we commit that sin ourselves. Is that what this hadith means? No, of course not. And if you look at the commentary on this hadith from like Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, Imam Ahmad says that, no, this is for a sin that he has repented from. So your brother repents from a sin, but you still want to shame him for it. Even though he has said he is already disassociated from that sin, he has moved away from it, but you still want to bring up his past to shame him or to laugh at him. That's what this hadith means. But Imam Tom here is using this hadith in a completely false way. Whoever finds fault with his brother for a sin, if he won't die until he commits it himself. This is like a mistranslation or a misconstrual of this hadith. And I think that Imam Tom should make a clarification video about this hadith and clarify and look at the commentary on this specific hadith. It's not just finding fault with your brother for a sin. It's much more than that. And like I said earlier, like the thing that we're calling out the compassionate imams for, we continue to call it out because they continue to promote this falsehood. They continue to promote the zandaqa, the batil, the reformism. They continue to promote that. And it's not with just the Qawm Lut issue. It spans many different issues, because their usul is reformism. And whether Imam Tom has recognized that or not, or if he will recognize that in the future, Allahu alam. But that's why their problems extend way beyond just this Qawm Lut issue. But even on this Qawm Lut issue, where have they repented? Where have they turned back? Where have they clarified? Where have they disavowed their previous stances? They've done none of that. They've not done none of that. So we are more than justified in continuing to criticize them for that and rebuke them for that. So that's another important thing to mention. So I hope that Imam Tom will clarify. But, it's shocking. Like, you go and you study in Medina for years, and then you come back to the US and you carry water for these reformists. Like, what a waste. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that there was another podcast that Imam Tom was on, and I saw that podcast with Yasser Qadi, and they're talking about politics and political Islam. And Yasser Qadi is making some shocking statements, some absolutely, pure zandaqa. And maybe I'll do a stream about that. But Imam Tom is there, and yeah, Imam Tom has his own position, and he is pushing back on Yasser Qadi. But that's not enough. Like, the thing is that if you just push back, you're making it seem like it's a difference of opinion. Like, you're just having ikhtilaf. Like, this is respectful ikhtilaf. Like, this is acceptable and this is acceptable, and we will respectfully disagree with all of the adab of ikhtilaf. Like, this is not correct. You don't have this kind of adab of ikhtilaf with zanadiqa, with zandaqa, with deviance and heresy and reformism. They're trying to reform the religion. And I mean, I was really shocked by some of these statements by Yasser Qadi, but you have people who carry water and create this wall. Okay, this is really, I've been meaning to create like some kind of meme or some kind of representation that where you can really get the idea of what people like Imam Tom are doing and the harm that they're causing, the damage that they're causing. But I haven't been able to find like a very easy meme like this, but this is what it is. Like, this diagram, like this wall is it does so much damage, because Muslims who would have been like on the right side, of the spectrum, they're blocked. Basically, they're blocked from considering that side of the spectrum. They find refuge on this politically correct left side of the spectrum. But guess what? This wall is moving. Like, it's constantly moving because of the political pressure of the alphabet people, and it's moving constantly. And that's why it's so important for those who know better, the ulama, the du'at, to constantly criticize so that we can exert pressure, so that we move this wall until it's destroyed, until we destroy this wall completely, inshallah. But in the meantime, we have to move it. So this navigating differences statement wouldn't have been made in 2022. Like, they didn't make any statement like this. And if you go back to 2020 or 2019, Yakin was openly promoting LGBT rights, So this wall was even further, on this side. And that's why we call them out. We have to call out Yakin. We have to call out Omar Sulaiman. We have to call out Yasser Qadi, Linda Sarsour. Like, we have to cancel them by name in order to exert that pressure to move this wall until it's finally destroyed. So people like Imam Tom, they're facilitating this wall. As long as they side with these people and they refuse to call them out, they are just facilitating this wall, preventing many Muslims from seeing, where they really should be, the correct Islamic position. Alhamdulillah, but they're losing. They're losing, and people are waking up. So may Allah facilitate that and hasten, the end of this psyop, this deception. So there are other statements that I want to look at just as a bonus, because there's a lot of people like Imam Tom who are just carrying water. So I want to play some audio from this guy, or actually before playing this audio from Hamza غير قطعي, we will look at statements of Omar Sulaiman regarding some very interesting statements that he has made in the past. Okay, when we first started criticizing Omar Sulaiman, he put out, this was back in October of 2019. He put out a statement, like we were doing a live stream just like this on Muslim Skeptic. And in the middle of the live stream, this article from Omar Sulaiman is published. And I covered the article in that live stream as well. I think the live stream is titled, what LGBT rights should Muslims support? Omar Sulaiman, like asking Omar Sulaiman directly. So he put out this convoluted nonsense statement, and there were some parts of it that were very interesting. So this was published by Muslim Matters. Okay, questions about my political activism, October 17th, 2019. So let's see. Let me get out my notes to get to because there are specific parts of this that it's kind of funny. There can be a reasonable debate about the Sunnah and how it's lived in certain aspects around us. Some use Hudebia to justify every form of engagement and say things like, if the Prophet ﷺ were alive, he would do this. So kind of like what Imam Tom did. I don't want to project anything on the Prophet ﷺ. My attempt is to draw from his Sunnah, not legitimize my shahawat. There are areas where the Prophet ﷺ showed compromise, but he never lost clarity. So where did the Prophet ﷺ compromise Islam? Compromise like core tenets of the deen. While the Treaty of Hudaybiyah had to admit Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim from the name of Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the name of Muhammad, none of the companions were confused about their realities. So he's comparing Treaty of Hudaybiyah with his alliances with Qawm Lut. So the legitimate debates around how to truly implement the Sunnah today largely emanate from what aspects of the prophetic call are its defining features and what our priorities and timelines, political or otherwise, should be. Tawheed is the foundation and primary basis for it all. As for what aspects of the call are defining features, the Prophet ﷺ was sent as a mercy to the worlds, defined his mission as perfection of character, said that Allah loves gentleness in all of his affairs, and was revolutionary in his compassion to everything around him. That doesn't mean he didn't get at times angry or use power to eliminate evil. He was not limited by mercy, but always enhanced by it. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so here's the important, interesting statement. Oh, I cannot, in good conscience, support anything that is opposed to the Sunnah, even as a matter of political expediency. Okay, so if that's the case, then why did your institute, since 2017, have a document saying that Muslims should affirm and advocate many LGBT rights? I believe in working together with communities on things we agree upon and learning to respectfully coexist with things we don't agree upon. So, working with communities, like working with the LGBT community, respectfully coexist with them. We agree on some things, we don't agree on some things. Live and let live. On such affairs, I maintain political neutrality with religious clarity. This is how he justifies. So, we can't oppose their rights. We have to be politically neutral, but still have religious clarity and relationship building that allows us to have these hard discussions as human beings seeking to reduce societal tension and promote the common good. So we want to build our relationship with Qawm Lut. So this is what navigating differences is about. That's what the document is about. I use multi-faith work as a blueprint for this. If people can harmoniously coexist, despite strong beliefs about God, purpose, salvation, and scripture, surely they can learn to coexist on political issues that are of far lesser consequence to them in their worldviews. So this is directly in the Navigating Differences document. So this is from 2019. This is what I'm talking about. It's just a consistent thread. So anyway, a lot of nonsense. So in our tribal politics in America, platforms are wide and coalitions are narrow. I believe in the exact opposite. I believe we should have specific issues that we determine important and meaningful and form broad coalitions around those specific issues. So this is his justification. Why is he working with all of these LGBT groups and politicians? He's like defending Ilhan Omar and writing, op-eds about how amazing and historic Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are. Like, this is what he's talking about. This way, the work is focused, the allyship with Qawm Lut is clear, and the advocacy is unproblematic. I guess it's unproblematic to advocate, whatever Qawm Lut advocates for. When it's a bunch of people working on a small set of issues, the issues dominate the conversation as opposed to who is at the table. It's about what we're at the table for. So if we're going to organize a march on the border against ICE deportations or against police brutality, I don't care who else is coming to the march or where they stand on other issues. So this is the statement that he made before, all the details came out about his water ritual, pagan ritual protest at the border. But he was this was foreshadowing. He was kind of preempting, like, I don't care who comes to the march. This is, to me, the essence of Hilf al-Fudul. So he uses the Sirah to justify, his pagan ritual marches and literally hand in hand with LGBT priestesses. So on Muslim politicians, no politician, Muslim or otherwise, deserves our uncritical support. So this is a tricky reality to navigate. It's so tricky. You have Ilhan Omar at pride parades and constantly advocating for Qawm Lut, and you have Hamza Yusuf saying that there's no difference between straight marriage and gay marriage. This is tricky. Like, what should we do? It's so tricky. When they take bold political positions, they should be qualifiedly praised specifically for those actions. When they do things that are problematic, they should be measuredly criticized specifically for those actions. We should want them to do well and want well for them. As politicians, they naturally make decisions that they have to be accountable to the public for. As brothers and sisters, we should pray for them to make the right decisions and be enabled with and for the truth. So we should enable Ilhan Omar and Hamza Yusuf. This is exactly what Yasser Qadi said just last month. We should stand with them and pray for them. They're our brothers and sisters. We should praise them specifically for their actions, qualified praise, but measured criticism. My question is, I definitely see the praise from Omar Suleiman and Yasser Qadi for these politicians. I've never seen them give any measured criticism specifically about those politicians by name. They praise them by name, but they never criticize them by name. I wonder why. Where has Omar Suleiman retracted his op-ed praising Ilhan Omar and endorsing her? Like, where calling her election historic? Where has he retracted that? Where has he said anything about her specifically? So this is navigating differences. Like, this is the document. It's just been reworked into, something for imams to sign and and endorse. So then what else? Here's another very interesting document. Imam Tom says that he has no conflict of interest. Is that really the case, Tom? Introducing Imam Tom, Research Director of Islam and Society. Oh, there's no conflict of interest here. Yakin welcomes the new research director. So he's completely neutral. So this is like, they even put a disclaimer on this. Yakin puts a disclaimer on all of their articles. The views, opinions, findings, and conclusions expressed in these papers and articles are strictly those of the authors. Furthermore, Yakin does not endorse any of the personal views of the authors on any platform. Our team is diverse on all fronts, allowing for constant, enriching dialogue that helps us produce high-quality research. So they put this disclaimer on every single article, but it's an empty disclaimer, because why are you publishing deviant views? Why are you publishing an article that defends human evolution? Why are you publishing an article that defends gay marriage? Why are you publishing... Like, you are making the decision to publish. So this disclaimer means absolutely nothing. And it's the same kind of disclaimer that Tom made. Like, I'm neutral, so you can take what I'm saying as objective. So I guess he learned that trick from his employer. Oh, okay. So now there's a video here that we can play that more navigating differences.
For example, just about the very nature of what you address.
So it set this up. They had a conference 3 years ago at Yasser Qadi's masjid in Dallas, and one of the speakers is Omar Suleiman. And he makes this really terrible speech. Let's look at what he says.
How you address it, right? But with this issue in particular, it's a very polarizing issue. And we have to remember that we are not immune to the broader debates that happen in the American public, right? We start...
The whole conference here is balancing our faith with civil rights. So, this kind of diplomatic language. We have to balance our faith. Balance Islam with LGBT rights. Like, just the whole title is off. The whole title is a compromise. The whole title of it is defeatism, just like navigating differences. It's defeatism.
To become divided upon the same lines, and we often regurgitate and ingest the same talking points, the same divides, and the same positions that other people have because they resemble what we think we have. And so just using the term conservative or liberal has such loaded assumptions behind it. Progressive has such loaded assumptions behind it. It's almost impossible to operate within those terms or to use those terms without getting a bunch of things projected on you. So that must mean you stand here, 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 and here. And so as Muslims, when we say, well, what's our authentic epistemology? We find that almost every word out of the dictionary has been taken and been, all types of assumptions have been cast upon those words. And so we don't know what to do anymore. Now, I want to say on this issue as well, that for Muslim leaders in particular, it is so crucial to build a framework, and they are the most vulnerable that will often find themselves scrambling. The greatest example of that, post-Orlando, the tragedy that took place in Orlando, the shooting at Pulse. How many phone calls took place between Muslims? We were on a high, we just bid farewell to Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah ta'ala, the greatest Muslim American, and one of the greatest Muslim Americans to ever walk the face of the earth, a person who inspired the world with his commitment to Islam and with his commitment to humanity, and then boom, pulse happened, right? And it was like, whoa. And Muslim leaders were scrambling to try to figure things out. And they came together, and it took call after call after call after call. The Orlando Statement was issued, which most scholars in America signed on to. Most local imams, most scholars signed on to that statement. Is it perfect? Probably not. Are there issues with it? Yes. But could the Muslim leadership have just backed up into a cocoon and said, we're not going to address this? You don't have that luxury if you're the imam of a masjid.
So he admits, this was in 2020 or 2019, I believe. The Orlando Statement is from 2016. So 3 years later, he admits, yeah, was it perfect? Yeah, were there issues with it? Yeah. I was telling them at the time that this is a bad statement. You're compromising, like you're just supporting LGBT rights in this statement. You're saying that they have the right to have whatever lifestyle. How can any imam sign on to this statement? And I, have analyzed and broke that down in other streams. But it takes 3 years for him to acknowledge, yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's more than not perfect. Like this is batil. Same thing with navigating differences. Maybe in 3 years, they'll acknowledge that, yeah, navigating differences had a lot of problems, or it had some problems. It wasn't perfect. So.
Or you are a Muslim intellectual with a platform, or wherever you are, you had to say something. Was it perfect? No. Do we learn from it? We should learn from it going forward. Post Birmingham, some of you saw the LGBT row that took place in the United Kingdom between Muslim parents and the school system, some of the curriculum that's being enacted in the UK. There's a joint statement of Muslim scholars and imams. It's literally called Joint Statement of Muslim Scholars and Imams on LGBT row in schools, which, by the way, I thought was actually a very good statement. The way that they wrote it seemed very intelligently, wisely crafted.
That statement is such trash, by the way. That statement that's the worst statement of all. It's worse than the Orlando Statement. It's worse than navigating differences. But it's very telling that he finds that to be like a wise statement. That statement is the worst one, actually. It's from the UK. I can't believe anyone signed on to that. But yeah, I mean, we analyzed it in Al-Asna Institute, and in one of our halaqas, we did a close reading. That one is really shockingly bad. But because that statement attacks, let's just go look at that statement. I'm not gonna leave you guys hanging. That statement, let's see, joint statement, LGBT schools. So this is a statement that he says had a lot of wisdom. This is like a shockingly bad statement. Okay, joint statement of Muslim scholars and imams on LGBT row in schools. This is from 2019. Okay. Beliefs about sexuality and LGBT in particular have been the subject of news coverage recently due to hundreds of Muslim parents in Birmingham protesting at the actions of their children's school senior leadership. So they were having this kind of issue, and now Muslims in the US are having this issue of schools taking on this curriculum. So now what does it say? The UK is a multicultural society. The Muslim community is by no means the only community here. And while we encourage constructive, respectful debate of ideas, we condemn one community's opinions and beliefs being forced upon others, no matter how big or small. Okay, don't force your beliefs and opinions on us. We, the undersigned, are inheritors of a scholarly tradition which, from its inception, enshrined a methodology for ensuring peaceful coexistence of the repeal. See, the same expression. I wonder where they got this expression from. Customs, beliefs, and even legal systems, whether it was different religious minorities having judicial and civic autonomy or different schools of thought among Muslims having overlapping jurisdictions, tolerating different opinions to relative degrees, is in the DNA of Muslim scholars and something our wider society today would do well to learn from. Yeah, but did Muslim society ever tolerate Qawm Lut? Did Muslim society ever tolerate those kinds of rights? No, never. One such thing we urge policymakers and executors to pay close attention to is the important distinction between facts and values. it is a fact to say that some people regard same-sex relationships as appropriate due to their philosophical and moral views, and some people do not. Just like it is a fact that some people regard eating meat to be appropriate and some do not. But to go beyond the facts into saying it is okay and normal to is in the realm of values, which should not be imposed on people who disagree. So this is basically saying that you should never impose values on people who disagree. What about every legal system does this? How about Islam? Like, Islam imposes values on people. That's what the Sharia is. The Sharia imposes on people that there are laws. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with the law, it's going to be imposed on you. Whether you agree or disagree, the law will be imposed on you. That's the nature of law. Values are imposed whether you agree or disagree. So this is basically a ridiculous statement. This is a ridiculous, false statement in every sense. It's false, like Islamically, it's false logically. The types of relationships a person or community regards as good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate, normal or abnormal, are not the result of hard facts, but a product of interacting beliefs and cultural norms about, for example, the purpose of life, desires and impulses, and conceptions of love, among others. So whoever wrote this statement and whoever signed on to it after having actually read it doesn't understand what a fact is. Same-sex behavior being fahisha is a fact. It's a fact. It's not a, opinion. It's a fact. What we consider to be good, what we consider to be appropriate, what we consider to be normal, these are facts. What is normal is a fact. Just because there are others who disagree, that doesn't mean it's less of a fact. So there are moral facts. Unless you're saying that there are no moral facts, everything is subjective, and you ascribe to moral subjectivism, then this is a false statement. That what you consider to be appropriate, what you consider to be good or bad, they're not a result of hard facts. So this is like a relativism, subjectivism. Passionately believing in a cause or moral standpoint is one thing, but then enforcing it on others is unacceptable. So then what about the law? Like, you can't have a legal system. You're basically nullifying the Sharia. The Quran, for example, and the Sunnah have all of these moral requirements that are imposed on people. If you don't abide by them, you are liable for punishment by Allah. That is coercion. That is forcing you, because there's a threat of punishment in the akhirah or in this life if you're living in an Islamic nation, for example. And there are criminal laws. Those laws are enforced on you, whether you agree with them or not. Those values, the moral standpoint is enforced. So this is like a statement of pure relativism and subjectivism. Like, it's so extreme. There is a clear and unambiguous acceptance in law that the primary givers of philosophical, moral, and ethical values to children are their parents. Schools, or anyone else for that matter, may only educate in these areas on behalf of the parents. So secular law completely disagrees with this. Parents do not have this right, increasingly less so. When there's a conflict between the philosophical, moral, or ethical positions of parents and teachers, schools must respect this and ensure teachers do not transgress the fact-value boundary mentioned above. Okay, well, if this is the case, this also counteracts Islamic schools, because Islamic schools enforce all kinds of Islamic values. Islamic schools enforce hijab, they enforce gender separation, they enforce halal food for lunch, they enforce, they teach a moral standpoint. Right? So teachers are transgressing the fact-value boundary mentioned above that you're describing. And what about schools in the Muslim world? Should schools in the Muslim world not teach values? Not segregate the genders, not, enforce hijab, because that's imposition. People might not agree. This includes ideologically or socially constructed norms, which some may passionately believe to be universal facts, while others do not, such as concerning sexuality or gender. So, ideologically or socially constructed norms, such as those concerning sexuality and gender, is the Islamic norms on sexuality and gender socially constructed? Or are they from Allah? Are they facts from Allah? No, these are subjective norms that are socially constructed. That's what this statement is saying. That's what this sentence is saying. It goes without saying that we likewise affirm the rights of those who disagree with our opinions, to do so without fear of insult, bullying, or any type of oppression whatsoever. Okay, they qualified it. They said that they didn't just make a broad statement. We affirm the rights of those who disagree, full stop. In navigating differences, they said we affirm the rights of this community, LGBT community, full stop. Their constitutional rights. But at least this statement, it goes further and says, with regards to bullying or oppression, I guess you could say that that's vague, but like violence, it's at least making a gesture towards that. So that's more than the navigating statement. However, we also expect the same in return, particularly not being subjected to state enforcement of values and philosophical convictions. We should respect and tolerate our differences without enforcing of some people's positions on others, especially children. So we should respect and tolerate. This is pure Omar Suleiman language. You want to respect and tolerate Qawm Lut. Why? Respect our differences. We have to navigate our differences. Like, do you see the same kind of language used? And then add your signature. So they have all of these signatories, And I think in many cases, they didn't read it or they didn't understand what they were signing. These are UK imams. So it's a shame. It's like a major shame. So this is like the worst type of statement. It's like subjectivism. It's promoting subjectivism, respecting and tolerating all of this nonsense. Okay, so let's go back to this speech. So he says that, that statement is so wonderful.
Of Muslim scholars and imams. It's literally called Joint Statement of Muslim Scholars and Imams on LGBT Wrote in Schools, which, by the way, I thought was actually a very good statement. The way that they wrote it seemed very intelligently, wisely crafted. But, a lot of people would criticize it. This word means that. And it's important to understand.
People are nitpicking. They'll criticize it. This word means that. Don't try to judge the document by its words.
It was very easy for those leaders, as well as leaders that sign on to many of these statements and take these stands, to say, we're just going to keep our names away. The safest thing to do would be not to say anything. Safest thing is just to avoid the issue altogether. And I'm sure, as I know in the case of the Orlando statement, as well as the Birmingham statement by Muslim scholars and leaders, there are words that not all of them preferred. There are sentences that they wish were expressed a little better, whether they wished it was more to this way or that way. Not everyone thought it was perfect, but ultimately, leaders felt a need to put out something, right? In the absence of it, people, flock to right and left to try to find their language on this. So, and I want to give you all this example because I think it's very important. It's very easy to write online. It's very easy to post a Facebook status. It's very easy to tweet about something. It's very easy to be very bold in your positions, whatever those positions are, until those.
So it's very bold. You can be very bold on a Facebook status, but also it's, so scary to sign a document. Like it's people are avoiding signing this document that says there are no hard facts about morality. Like, isn't he just contradicting what he just said? Like, how Facebook is also public. You know that, right? It's actually more public than on some random site, a statement with your signature.
Positions become consequential to communities. And I want to just observe, this was a social experiment, and subhanAllah, I was looking for the name. And I'm not going to say anything about Epic's Wi-Fi, but that's controversial to me too, because I was having a hard time pulling up this page. It was a social experiment where they looked at how communities talk amongst each other, and then once the community they're talking about is observing the discussion, how the tone changes. I'll give you an example. If you're on Facebook and you're typing out, right? MashaAllah, people posted a lot on Facebook and a lot on these social media things, and it got really charged. If a non-Muslim checked into the conversation, right, the tone just automatically changes. It's like, wait a minute, this is no longer our echo chamber. Why are you infringing on my space? You're not supposed to be here. It's natural. When people are amongst themselves, their own kind, or people that share their viewpoints, they find it very easy to express things, sometimes very raw, sometimes very, not in the most sensitive ways. But then it's like, wait a minute, someone else is there. So let me actually just put this out there, inshallah, as a general rule of thumb. There is no such thing anymore as an internal conversation. All right? Not as a community or as an individual. All right? If you have Alexa in your home, I'm not going to go any further. There's no such thing anymore as an internal conversation. All right? And so we have to craft rhetoric that is consistent. We have to be in conversation with the circumstances around us that are authentic, in ways that are authentic, consistent, and compassionate, bidnillahi ta'ala. So how do we start to build this framework out? Sheikh, what time did you say I have to finish by the way? 5:40. Okay. How do we start to build this framework out? So I'm going to speak really fast, which means I might finish before 5:40, Allahu alam, but I'll try, inshallah ta'ala, to at least get through this thoroughly. Think about building a framework, right, with alliances and coalitions and just in general with our interactions of society. So what's the first commitment that everyone in society can make? Everyone in society can commit to genuine condemnations of hate, dehumanizing rhetoric, bullying against whoever it may be, right? Whether it is the LGBT community or the Jewish community or whatever it may be, all types of communities, we can commit ourselves to, again, avoiding hate, dehumanizing rhetoric, bullying. We can condemn violence. We can and should condemn precursors to violence. We should revisit those things all the time, and not because it's bad.
So we should condemn precursors to violence. Like, what does that mean? Like, that's exactly the language of the left that they're saying now. Like, you're protesting this curriculum in schools. This is a precursor to violence. You're not respecting our pronouns. This is a precursor to violence. So he uses the same language. He's picked it up from these groups that he's constantly allying with. This is Democrat rhetoric, exactly. So anyway, he has a lot of nonsense in this. We're just, for the sake of time, we're not going to go through the whole thing. There's another statement that we can play that came from one of these imams who drafted and wrote the Navigating Differences statement. I'm just going to play, because it was just audio, it was not video, so I'll just play the audio for you. Clips. It's from this Hamza Maqbool, who is one of these guys who, like Imam Tom, who carries water for the Compassionate Imams, specifically Omar Sulaiman and Yasir Qadi, and they're under them, basically. So this guy, Hamza Maqbool, let me actually show you some pictures. So this is what Maqbool was saying. So I started criticizing Ilhan Omar around 2018, 2019. Linda Sarsour as well. I was criticizing them. In response, these Compassionate Imams and their, servants came out and defended Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, these politicians, and made statements like, oh, our sisters in Islam. And so this kind of history, some people might not remember it. So look at, what he's saying about sisters, his sisters. Dancing at the Pride Parade is a bridge too far. So this was in response to Ilhan Omar dancing at the Pride Parade. However, our community has cultivated this culture of identitarian, nothingistic Islam. The impulse to give politicians more respect than ulama at the Eid prayer invites brain-eating pop Muslims and comedians to headline conferences. Okay, I don't know what that's saying. Those are the conferences that you're attending or that you're promoting or that your buddies are promoting or attending. Our sisters in Congress are not Kleenex tissues to be thrown away now that we see some snot on them. So even though Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib are participating in all of this fahisha, he still says, our sisters in Congress, we should not just throw them away now that we've seen some snot. However, I hope people now realize that getting Muslims into Congress or even the White House will not solve our problems. Oh, thanks. Yeah, no one realized that. Thanks for pointing that out. You're so insightful. The ulama have been saying it not just to be haters. Allah rectify the errors of our sisters in Congress and reward them for the best of their work. So this is carrying water for, these politicians. Muslims, normal Muslims say, of course, we don't want anything to do with Ilhan Omar. We don't want anything to do with Rashida Tlaib. We're not even sure they're Muslim. We're not even sure they're Muslim. And then this guy comes sweeping in. Our sisters, okay, they have some mistakes, but we can't just throw them away. So this is, I hope you're seeing like the game that these people play. Oh, when was that from? That was from 2019, June. So it was Pride Month in 2019. Then another post, Allah reward our sister, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and her allies, AOC and whatever. But most of all, Allah honor our dear sister, Ilhan, who spoke the truth and was raked over the coals by the left and right that the idol of AIPAC could be struck. We love our Jewish neighbors and genuinely care for their well-being. So like Ilhan makes some like tepid remarks against Israel, and then, oh, our hero and Rashida, oh, may Allah honor our sister. Oh, we love them. Oh, so much. March of 2019. So this was before the Pride March. But Ilhan had been involved in all kinds of Pride marches for her whole career, her whole political career. And that's what I was pointing out. She was also condemning the Sharia. She was condemning the Sharia in Congress, writing bills to sanction Muslim countries, signing bills to support Israel, actually. And then here, the Sheikh Hamza Ghair Qat'i comes in. Oh, our sister. We must pray for her. May Allah honor her. So they have this like record of this kind of behavior, carrying water. So then this was funny. So then today, or not today, what am I saying? Earlier this week, Congressman Rashida, his sister that he prayed so much for, wrote, "Happy Pride. No matter who you are, who you love, your congresswoman loves you and will always have your back. This honor, we honor all the blah, blah, blah." So then he quote tweets this. And he says, "This is what is happening in our country with our political leaders who identify themselves as Muslim and are taken as such by many in our community and outside of it." Yeah, people like you for years. You think this is the first pro alphabet statement that Rashida Tlaib has made? She says this every day, almost every day she's promoting this. And now like, oh, political leaders who identify themselves as Muslims. Oh, you're not going to call her your Muslim sister this time? She's not your Muslim sister this time? You're not going to pray for her? Just because there's some snot on the Kleenex, don't throw her away. Don't throw her away, Hamza. This is what is happening in our country. This is why the navigating difference statement was necessary. Like, look at this clown. SubhanAllah. So, and he has many statements like this. So this was just from last year. So basically there's this judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she's being confirmed for the Supreme Court. And she went viral. Why? Because in the congressional hearings, they asked her, what does it mean to be a woman? What is a woman? And she doesn't answer it. She's like, I'm not a biologist. I can't answer that question. So then, so she's being mocked by many. And then Hamza Maqbool comes, the hero, to defend her. GOP senators bungling through their incompetent attempts to crucify Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson remind me of the crazy masjid uncle or auntie who's the first to ask a question after a dars or bayan, which is just a disjointed plea for emergency mental health intervention, but also somehow are in charge of the whole joint. So the GOP senators are like the aunties and the uncles who are crazy in the masjid. So, can you make heads or tails of this nonsense? Like they're trying to crucify Judge Brown Jackson, Ketanji Brown, by asking her what is a woman. So this is the kind of he portrays himself as this traditional imam. We've already covered, like, go to the video on Zaid Shaker and how Hamza tries so hard to defend his bro Zaid Shaker. Here's another post from just last year, February 2022. Sexually deviant lifestyles aren't sanctioned by our sacred law. But there are other things in Islam, many of which are of higher priority. Yet some who never read and have no idea what those things are would rather fixate on LGBTQ issues. Then they would rather fixate on LGBT issues rather than learn hadith, kalam, or ... tajweed. And then he posts a South Park cartoon gif or whatever. So back just, a year ago, just a little bit over a year ago, he's saying, oh, people are so fixated on this LGBT. People who don't know tajweed. You don't want to learn hadith, but you want to talk about LGBT. You're so confused. I have known openly gay people who devote less of their concentration to it than these people, referring to me. There is a personality type that will obsess with such antagonism for, shall we say, less than natural causes. So we're obsessed with what? Opposing LGBT for less than natural causes. Oh, what causes are that? Why? What are you implying there, Hamza, with your broken English? So this is just a year ago. Don't be obsessed. There's more important things like hadith and kalam. Oh, kalam. How many books of kalam have you read? How many books of kalam have you studied? Unless it's more than X number, you should not be talking about LGBTQ. Otherwise you're obsessed. You're obsessed with the issue. So this is what he was saying. But now, fast forward, this is what is happening in our country. This is why the statement was necessary. We had to make a statement. SubhanAllah, what a joke this guy is. So then he had a Facebook post, making some criticism of me. And then people in his comments are like, this has gotten too far. People need to start taking physical action against me. So these are people who are threatening, his fans, who are threatening physical action against me. Then someone says, what are you recommending? And he says, whatever is necessary. His actions will end up indirectly physically harming innocent Muslims. So time to take physical action against Daniel. And then this guy, also in the comments, Dustin Cron or whatever, 80% chance that the dude is an agent whose job is to make divisions in the community. 20%, he's just this messed up. So Dustin is a CARE, I don't know if he currently or former CARE director. CARE has been discovered to have like actual spies, like actual Zionist spies working for CARE. But you want to accuse me of being an agent? I'm causing divisions in the community just because I call out these compassionate imams, or I call out CARE and their alphabet promotion. So I must be an agent then. But CARE that has actual Zionist agents working for them. It was like a big scandal. You want to see what this is about? Let me bring it up for you. Look at this. NPR reporting a leader of an Ohio Muslim organization was fired for spying for a hate group. So this was in 2021. This guy, Roman Iqbal of Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, attends a press conference at CARE Columbus. So he was terminated for sharing information about the organization to a known anti-Muslim hate group. It's like a Zionist group. So CARE is the one who has these spies, but they're accusing me. This director, Dustin, is accusing me of being a agent. So you can't make this stuff up. Back to Dustin here. So here's on that post on Facebook, all this storm, why? Because I participated in an initiative to clear up the Muslim stance against LGBT ideology, which was a document signed on by over 300 signatories. So that at the moment of unity and focus, attention shifts from prosecuting a victory to debate, defending oneself against all sort of contrived and made up slanderous accusations makes a person wonder what his agenda is. So if you point out that your statement is a disaster, like it's a compromise on Islam, it's a defeatist, piece of garbage, basically, then, oh, you're against unity. What's your ideology? What's your agenda? You're some kind of agent or spy. And then he says, don't you feel like ignoring him is more fruitful? Then this guy says, Maulana, don't worry about this bi ghairat. He's just looking to promote his courses online. And then this guy says, this is true. However, whipping up discontent in the Arabic-speaking world will have repercussions that are not only more dangerous theologically speaking, they are also more likely to be a threat to my physical safety. So if you criticize him, that's a threat to his physical safety. So we better not criticize him. It's dangerous. Meanwhile, people are commenting on his post about attacking me physically and taking care of me physically. There's this same guy. The Sahaba directly handled the Khawarij like business and didn't just sit and make dua. Remember, tie the camel, then make dua. So you're calling him Khawarij? You're calling Daniel Khawarij? Bring your evidence. And then this guy said, do you not read the main post by Hamza? He's being harassed and insulted. Moreover, the Sheikh now fears physical harm. These things, alongside the bad history, are more than enough for Daniel to have become a threat. And then this guy, Osman Mir, says, I already requested the FBI to arrest Daniel. They are not responding. So they're calling the FBI. They want to arrest me. It'll lead to dhulm by Islamophobic authorities, not permitted in our religion. Just incite all Muslims to take him down from panels. So we have to incite other Muslims to take him down physically, right? We're reporting to him to the FBI, and we need to have him physically removed. And some of these comments were liked, by the way, by Hamza Maqbool. He's liking some of these comments about attacking me physically. Why is the American agency not arresting this extremist? Meaning me. And then Dustin says, because they pay him. Yeah, they're paying me. They're paying me to make this stuff against your compassionate imams. Oh, what world are these people living in? Oh, yeah. So this is the new class. I'm doing free advertising for Yasser Qadi. He's so opposed to the normalization of Qawm rights, or he's so opposed to this lifestyle, he says. But co-teaching with Jonathan Brown, the guy who wants to affirm and advocate many of these rights. And now people will say, oh no, this is Jonathan Brown's old position. Now he has a new position. No, he doesn't. This is his position. He has it on his website. We can go to his website right here. Where is it? You can go to jonathanbrown.com. This is his Yakin essay, and it's still up on his site. You can download the PDF version. So Muslims in the US should affirm and advocate for many, but not necessarily all LGBTQ rights. So we've seen it a million times. He's teaching, co-teaching with Yasser Qadi at Hadith. So, and someone was posting like the class is like $1,500. So if you got an extra $1,500 to spare, you can learn Hadith from Jonathan Brown and Yasser Qadi. So that sounds like a good deal, right? So, okay. So anything? Oh, the video, the audio statement. So this is the Hamza guy. He's explaining the navigating differences document. He's explaining it and defending it against my criticisms. So what does he say? Let me play this for you. It's just audio. There's no video with it. Mulvey's think in a legalistic way, but that's not everything. He knows better than how these Mulveys think about things. You can't hear the audio? Can you hear what I was playing right now? It should be. Oh, it's not being picked up. Okay. I'll have to play it on this then. Sorry. Sorry about that. It's because of StreamYard. It doesn't let you play. Okay. Sorry about that. Here is better.
More than any of that, a human being is not just a person who thinks like in terms of rules and law. I feel like sometimes like, Molvis and lawyers, they have this thing that they think about everything like in a legalistic way. And that's not everything. It's important, but it's not everything. And so one thing is that rules, you maybe, like good lawyers, if you talk to them, anything, whatever it is, you say, I'm going to go across the street and buy a bottle of water from the 7-Eleven across the street. They'll tell you 7 reasons why this is going to like completely destroy you. And I wouldn't do that if I were you. Scare the smack out of you. And you'll be like, oh man, good thing you're here. Otherwise I may have gone and bought a bottle of water and lost my license and lost this and got deported and liability for this, that, and the other thing. There are movies like that as well. Why? Because you understand the law, you see what the possibilities are. But life is more than it's fulfilled part.
Okay. So don't think about things in a legalistic way. Life is more than just law.
The fact is that the way we have to negotiate our path through over here is very different than the way that those people are going to negotiate their path through. The social contract that we have with the people around us is very different than the social contract that people have around them. So people ask me questions. Like, for example, I got a question just yesterday. Someone says, I work in a school. And there is a student, I'm a teacher, and there's a student that identifies as a gender other than theirs and says, use the pronouns they, them for me. Don't say whatever gender the person was born with. is this permissible or not? Now, in terms of a purely simple fiqhi hukum, right? I said, well, are you going to get fired? What's going to happen? No one's going to fire me. They're not going to be happy with me if I choose not to, comply, but I'm also not going to get fired. It's just something ambiguous in the middle. On the face of it, to say they, them is not to misgender a person. It's just to avoid the issue of what their gender is in the first place. But then a person has to understand that things are, again, more complicated than that. On one side, if you don't misgender the person and you make them happy, it's actually a sunnah to call people by the name that they feel honored by, and to, in general, not be a person who is just harsh and abrasive for no reason.
So this is Hamza Maqbool saying, yeah, use their pronouns. This is the sunnah. This is the sunnah. Yeah. Gender pronouns, call them what they ask. That's the sunnah. This is one of the drafters, one of the writers of this Navigating Differences. And he's such a traditional imam. Oh, subhanallah. So he's saying explicitly, it's the sunnah to use them by the pronouns that they choose, the names that they choose. This is the sunnah. Wow. Unbelievable. No wonder this guy loves Imam Zayd Shakir so much. The imam who says that, yeah, we need a third space for, anyone who Muslim transgender, we need a third space. Of course, Hamza Maqbool loves Zayd Shakir. They're peas in a pod. He's like, yeah, of course. It's sunnah to respect their pronouns. That's the name that they've chosen for themselves. Don't be harsh. This is the peaceful coexistence, okay, that he's referring to in his document that he co-wrote according to himself, because in this same podcast, he says that he is one of the drafters of the document, along with Yasser Qadi, Omar Sulaiman, and Hatem al-Hajj.
At the same time, this interaction that's happening right now is more than just this one teacher and this one student. And the implications will be more than just that. Why? Because if things become a custom that we're not accustomed from before, then afterward it becomes law, it becomes ossified, it becomes something that you can't really go back on. These are issues we have to understand. We have a really important need to negotiate these things in our social contract with the people that we live in and that we live around. We don't have this concept in Islam that other minorities have had in the past, which is that you live like an urchin, you live like a leech on the host that you live amongst. There are people who have done this, that between us, we don't give a damn about what happens to the society. We don't give a damn about everybody else's house on our street. We don't give a damn about the people around us. We don't think like that. At the same time, we're not the sacrificial lamb that guys go ahead and run over us with the van or with the truck, and we're just gonna go back to Allah Ta'ala and just as long as you.
So it's funny because he actually in the past has said we don't care what non-Muslims do. We don't give a damn what non-Muslims do on this issue. You're only obsessed well, who cares? I wish I could pull it up, but if you go to his Facebook, you should be able to find probably last year or as early as last year. We don't care what the non-Muslims do. Who cares? But now, we have to negotiate a social contract, and we're not like the minorities of old. We can't be urchins or leeches. So this is so confused. I'm just cringing. Every single word that he says is more confusing than the last.
Just as long as you guys are happy. No, we also are obliged to uphold the dignity of ourselves, and through that we uphold the dignity of Islam as well. Dignity doesn't mean that you have to be treated special, but it also doesn't mean that you should portray what a Muslim is as being somebody who is just a really unimportant person. That you should at least be an equal with the people around you, and you should at least seek some sort of equal treatment.
What is he talking about?
These issues require some sort of understanding and some sort of leadership and some sort of cooperation between people, because the social contract between Muslims and America cannot be negotiated by one Muslim or by one American. America is a sovereign polity. Whether you like it or not, it's a sovereign polity. It has a constitution. that constitution, people differ about how to interpret it. Even people in the same government may differ how to interpret it. Even the judges differ how to interpret it. This is why the court exists in the first place, is that when people have differences on how to interpret it, then there needs to be some mechanism to resolve that interpretation. Otherwise, the Constitution could mean, one thing for, for a person who's a literalist. It could mean another thing for a person who's a traditionalist. It could mean another thing for a person who wants to reinterpret it in light of X, Y, Z. And it could be like a parable about, the warmth of a spring morning to another person. It doesn't matter. It could mean anything to anyone. The fact is that the way we have.
So the Constitution can mean anything to anyone. So when we say that we support your constitutional rights, that could mean anything. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see.
Not to decide. You tell me. If we were to.
Sorry, I'm trying to speed it up, so maybe I can't speed it up. I can't speed it up. Okay.
Ask the ulama in America to agree on anything. This is the same thing religious people will tell you and the same thing irreligious people will tell you, except for they'll have a very different tone. All of them will say they don't agree about anything. How the hell are they going to get anything done? Irreligious people say, look at all these Maulvis. They're all uneducated, backwards. They're all users and choosers and abusers. And, they do this and they do that. And they're all selfish and they're this and they're that. And but functionally, what are they saying? So they're not going to ever agree on anything to do something. And then on the flip side, you ask religious people, they'll be like, it's difficult. This person is going to get fired from their job. This person, they said it, but it's hard. We should support them, make dua and blah, blah, blah. But functionally, we all know it's the same issue. It's the same problem. This is part of your journey on the spiritual path. One is that if we're not functional as human beings, as social creatures, the spiritual path is very far-fetched. We're not even going to fulfill the basic tenets of our deen. It's going to be a problem. We're not going to be able
Does anyone understand this?
Survive as a community than to throw a person a bone and say, well, you can be as Muslim as you want as an individual. This is not how Islam works. It's not how human beings work. This is why I wanted to mention this to you. Those of people who are unfortunate enough to follow me on social media have seen that there's been kind of a fair amount of noise that has come up around the releasing of a particular document. I myself, in forums in the United States of America amongst Muslim leaders, like famous imams and famous preachers and scholars, for whatever reason or another, sometimes I get invited to these things. They're oftentimes closed doors. And, what's said is said in those gatherings as amana. I have no idea. There are people who actually get invited to these, big conferences, and they actually have large followings, and they have like teams of people working with them to put their content out, to edit the video, to do all of these things. And so for whatever reason, they say, well, why don't you call Hamza? And he can also give his point of view, because there's a different demographic, obviously, he's
done good work for us in the past.
Fulan al-Conferency, he has a particular appeal to certain people. But then what happens is that those people at some point or another will interact with somebody like you who are here, who are listening at home. And there's a higher likelihood that, if the two groups don't see eye to eye with one another, this sort of social cohesion is not going to be possible. That's necessary. Because at the end of the day, look.
So he admits what happened. Like, he got a call from these compassionate imams, whether it was Omar Suleiman or Yasser Qadi or whoever, maybe it was Hatem al-Hajj, I don't know. Probably not Hatem al-Hajj. But those two called him and they said, look, you have more sway with your community, like people of this kind of orientation, and basically Deobandis. You have more sway with them, so you sign on and you push it onto them. You push this document onto them. So he's admitting that this is what happened.
I'm the first guy who's going to tell you if it's, if it wasn't slaughtered by a Muslim who held a knife and said Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, it's haram. If it's slaughtered by a machine, it's haram. I don't care if you like it or not, it's haram. I'm going to die with this. I'm going to cherish dying with this and taking it with me to my grave. And it's going to look good in the day of judgment. And the other things not.
MashaAllah. He's so strict. He's so strict on halal meat. SubhanAllah. He's strict on halal meat, and he's strict on praising his sisters in Congress. Ilhan Omar, and shedding tears for Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and defending them. And also Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. He's so strict. Halal meat and Ilhan Omar, those things go hand in hand. The people who are really strict on halal meat, they also have this kind of tendency to defend these congresswomen and these left-wing people, right? He's so traditional, and he has a long beard, subhanallah. Whenever he writes any Arabic word, he makes sure to include the diacritical markings to show the correct transliteration, to show how good his Arabic is and his tajweed. Oh, and he studied so much kalam. MashaAllah. That's why he's, signing these documents and pushing them onto the Muslim community at the behest of his masters.
Says that you can't calculate your Eid. I'm going to be the first guy who says I have all these positions that I hold. That
MashaAllah, he's strict on moon sighting.
Me, but I hold them very strong. At the end of the day, however, I'm not that fanatical in terms of my opinions and fiqh.
He's not that fanatical. Oh yeah, he's so strong on halal meat and moon sighting, but I'm not that crazy. I'm not that fanatical. Oh my, subhanallah. This is how they play games. Like they play games with the deen of Allah.
Or even, non-kufr opinions of aqidah, that I would think it's better for a Muslim to be subjugated to a person who doesn't even know the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or care what's in the Quran, or knows them and detests them, versus another person. Someone goes to a conference and I don't know, they pray Jummah at the wrong time and they eat the wrong chicken. I disagree with all of that above, right? But I myself understand there's something that we have in common, that there's some sort of mutual interest that we should work with one another. At the end of the day, that person, even by our own aqidah, we say that they're not going to the hellfire. Whoever has even the minimal, like atom's worth of faith in their heart, meaning that they have so little Islam, even other Muslims don't notice that they're a Muslim. That even there are going to be many of those types of people who will be forgiven on the day of judgment. So I'm not going to say, okay, this guy's eating the wrong chicken, like flip him the bird and say, you flip me the haram bird and I flip you another haram bird back and screw you and we're done. It's going to be dushmani. It's going to be like enmity until the day of judgment. No, I'm not that stupid. So you work with people on things that you agree with them about, and the things you disagree, feel free to cherish your disagreements within reasonable, parameters. What are the reasonable parameters? Those things that are your needs for your account that you're going to give on the day of judgment, and that are beneficial for the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Otherwise, there are many people, if you tell them, hey, eating this such and such haram thing is haram, then they'll say, oh, screw you, I'm done with Islam, right? Okay, now what did you do? You pushed the rock in the wrong direction, right? That should be common sense. It should be, but common sense not all that common. So in that vein, in Ramadan of this year, and I've pushed this, by the way, in these gatherings, I don't want to name names because it's an amana. I pushed it from before. I said, look, amongst you is Salafi, amongst you is modernist, amongst you is a different madhab, amongst you is men and women, amongst you is all sorts of different, things that are not demographically or ideologically aligned with what I'm trying to do or who I am. I said, any one of you pick yourself as an amir. Any one of you pick one of yourself or some of yourselves to be a qadi to settle the disputes of the Muslims. And even if I hate your guts, I'll sign on to it. Why? Because some consistency is better than no consistency at all. This is also the mandate of Islam. And this is one of the reasons I get so bothered by the Khilafah people. They're the most disorderly of people, illa man sha'Allah, that I've met in my life. Just as long as you guys are happy. No, we
So he has to make a hit. He has to make a jab at, after all that. Oh, we overlook these differences, but he has to make a jab at the khilafa people. Those nuts, those crazy people, who want khilafa. They're so disorganized. Like, dude, stick to one line of thought.
Have to decide. You tell me. If we were to ask the ulama in America to agree on anything, forums in the United States of America amongst Muslim leaders, like famous Imams and famous till the Day of Judgment, no. I'm not a profligate person. Mufti Palanpuri, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of his wasaya, I read it in his own handwriting. He said that make sure you're not that profligate person, that you're such a corrupt person. You say and do all the right things in front of people, but you're inside so corrupt that 1 million people enter into Jannah on the Day of Judgment because of you, and you're the only one burning in the fire afterward. But that's a thing, it happens. The politics takes a different form when you're doing it through the prism of your suluk. But it's still there. It still exists. You still have to think about it. And so in Ramadan, this person who's forget about Sufi or whatever, completely ideologically, one might balk at any sort of connection. After making these suggestions myself in those gatherings and it not really being taken all that seriously, he made a suggestion, forget about Qadi and Amir and any of these things. He said, what? He said, let's make a statement that we can all sign on to. Because this Hamza Yusuf, not Hamza Yusuf Zaytuna, California one, but Hamza Yusuf in Scotland, the Desi Hamza Yusuf. He became the first minister of Scotland. I met him when he was a minister of the Scottish Parliament.
Wow.
He got elected, and he said a number of things. He said a number of things about the LGBTQ issue, and he mentioned it in the context of sin or not sin and things like that. And, the thing is, someone might say, oh, he's just a politician. He's only doing it to save his seat. But the fact
Why can't he say, why doesn't he say exactly what Hamza Yusuf said? Repeat that kufr so people know, like you're teaching people supposedly in this gathering for this podcast or whatever. Tell them what Hamza Yusuf said explicitly, that he said that there's no difference between gay and straight and gay marriage or straight marriage. Repeat that so that people know exactly what it is. And then you'll have to say the status of that kind of statement and the status of the person who makes that kind of statement. You want to mention that you met him. Okay, mashallah, you've met him at one point. But why don't you repeat exactly what the issue is?
Says something. It means something. And then what happened is, as a reaction against that, some people say, oh, you're a kafir, you're out of Islam, you're done, you're finished, this and that, as if it's some sort of Donald Trump, getting rid of someone on The Apprentice or whatever, right? And these things, they disturb the believers. Some of them should disturb them, but it's a disturbance. I didn't think there's not any good out of either of those things happening.
What either of those things?
There's an element to truth in some of it, but.
So people made takfir of this guy for making the haram halal, and specifically referring to the Book of Allah, because in Hamza Yusuf's statement, he said that I know what the Quran says, but what we say is different from the Quran. So it was blatant kufr, the kind of kufr that takes you out of Islam. You had scholars make takfir of that politician. You had Mufti Yasser Nadim come out publicly and saying this takes you out of Islam. You had Muhammad Hijab, brother Muhammad Hijab, also may Allah reward him, came out and made a statement saying, a video, this guy is not a Muslim. He has left Islam for this statement. So that is a lot of benefit that comes from that. It's clarifying the deen, it's clarifying the dividing line between iman and kufr that Muslims need to know, they have to know. So there was a very good, needed statement for people to make and excommunicate this politician. You're not a Muslim. But look at the way that, this Hamza guy, how he characterizes it. It's not necessary. There's no benefit in this. Why? He doesn't even state the statement of what that politician said. He doesn't repeat it because then he'll have to explain, okay, how can you defend this? Or how can you say there's no good in takfir of this person? So this is, this is the kind of person Hamza Maqbool is, the traditionalist. He's so strict. I mean, this is the same kind of deception of Yasser Qadi, actually, being I'm going to say it like it is. I'm going to pound my fist on the table on this issue so that people will say, oh, wow, mashallah, he's such a traditionalist. Oh, he's upholding the deen. He's standing, fighting for the deen. And then they go and make dua and praise Ilhan Omar or Linda Sarsour, or they go have a conference with some of these reformists, or they have Dalia Mogahed as a co-faculty, or like, this is being two-faced.
Let's make a statement. That statement all of us can sign, so that if someone mouths off in the future, then people will know, is this compliant and conformant to Islam? Muslims will know, non-Muslims will know. Furthermore, such a statement can be something that kids who are, don't want to participate in Pride Month in school, or employees who don't want to participate in it in their workplaces or in government offices or whatever, they can say this is a bona fide belief of ours as Muslims. Because what happens right now, I've actually worked as an expert witness of the court. You get paid $300 an hour. It's a sweet gig. Which is what? That the court needs to know, is this something that a Muslim has to do or doesn't have to do? Is this something really a part of Islamic law or not? Is this marriage valid? Is it not valid, etc.? I'm not that stupid. So you work with people on things that you agree with them about, and the things you disagree, feel free to cherish your disagreements within reasonable, parameters. What are the reasonable parameters? Those things that are your needs for your account that you're going to give on the Day of Judgment, and that are beneficial for the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Otherwise, there are many people, if you tell them, hey, eating this such and such haram thing is haram, then they'll say, oh, screw you, I'm done with Islam, right? Okay, now what did you do? You pushed the rock in the wrong left to the side.
Sorry, I repeated the wrong thing.
What happened with me is that I'll write a synopsis, and then they'll not invite me. I'll be summoned for a deposition, and I have to under oath. There's a stenographer writing everything. If I screw up anything that I'm saying or say anything inconsistent, it's going to cost the case of the person that I'm writing the opinion for, and I don't write the opinion for batil. If people want to hire me, even at $300 an hour, if the case is completely nonsense and they want me to lie about the deen, I will not do it. But alhamdulillah, mashallah, every case I've taken, we've won, with one exception, where the lawyer himself was very upset. He said this was a slam dunk case, and we ended up settling anyway because the client, I tried to convince him to let it go to court, but he was just afraid that he's going to. Otherwise, every case that I've ever done the expert testimony for, we've won. So a document like this is invaluable, because it means what? That a person who's going to get fired from a job or whatever, they have something canned already. And when you have what I think is up to 300 scholars now. And it's not just any random people. They have to actually be scholars and imams, not just a dude who gives khutbah. And there are people like that who are trying to get their names on it, and we're saying no. These are people who have some sort of scholarly authority or some sort of scholarly training. The 300 ulama, in some sense of the word, have signed on to this thing. It carries a lot more authority in a legal setting. And it inoculates a person from the celebrities and from the politics.
He's an expert witness, right? If you're an expert witness, then if you say something is part of Islam or not, by virtue of you being the expert witness, you don't need a document. You're the expert witness. That's why they have your testimony. Otherwise, they could go to any statement or any other person and claim anything. So what is this adding?
Lie about Islam in order to make money or get their film, pushed out, or whatever other things that they want to do, that they'll throw parts of the deen under the bus for. This is a very important milestone in the history of Islam in America, because you have not had anything like that, to my knowledge.
What are you talking about? You had the Orlando Statement from 2016. It's the same thing. Like, that statement is exactly the same in terms of what it calls for as this navigating differences. Respecting the rights of LGBT is the same. What's so monumental? In fact, that one had many more signatures. That one had more signatures than this navigating differences.
So many people have come together and collaborated on something. The thing is, it's open and shut. This should be common knowledge to people. There are so many things that should be common knowledge to people. People will fight about. It's not just something in America. It's a sickness that's there in the Muslim world because we no longer care for each other. We no longer love each other. In Pakistan, right, Jawad, you're Bengali, so you should be happy. We're going to rag on Pakistan a little bit, right? In Pakistan, there is a movement that the ulama launched to get the Qadianis declared as non-Muslims. They believe in some crackpot guy afterward who claimed he was a Nabi. He made a bunch of bogus predictions. None of them came true. He used to cuss from the mimbar, and he said, I'm the messenger of Allah. And he also happened to say that, like, we don't fight against the British. How convenient. And their world headquarters is not in India. It's not in Pakistan. It's where? It's in London. To get Qadianis declared as non-Muslims constitutionally within Pakistan, it should be, there's a legal procedure, but it should be an open and shut case. It was a big movement. There was a lot of flack that was given. You have to remember, initially the Qadianis were one of the first groups of people who are at least culturally identify as Muslims that took British education and that learned English and all of this other stuff. So they were overrepresented in the first governments of Pakistan. The foreign minister of Pakistan, the initial foreign minister of Pakistan, was Qadiani as well, and they had very strong positions in the country and in the government. To get through that process was a difficult process. They finally got through it. Zulfiqar Ali Bhutto, rahimahullah ta'ala, the kinsman of mine, distant kinsman of mine, who was the one who signed it. He was a relatively corrupt individual. He was known to drink. It said that when they came to the signing ceremony of this constitutional amendment, that he literally had the trolley with like the different spirits and everything over there. One of the ulama said, "Hey, you're like the sovereign leader of a Muslim country. If you want to drink, at least do it on the side, like so openly." And so he laughed at them, right? You have Jamaat-e-Islami there, you have Ahl Hadith, the Salafis there, you have the Deobandis there, the Deocrats and Republicans there, the Brahmins are there, the modernists, everybody, Shia, Sunni, everybody's there, right? All their top scholars. And he laughed at them. He said, look, if you guys can all pray the next salat that comes in, if you can all pray in one congregation behind one imam, forget about hiding it. I'll give up drinking altogether. Guess what? At least they had the tawfiq of all agreeing that like a Nabi after the Prophet ﷺ is fake. At least they could do that much. More than that was too much for them to do. And if you think America is better, America is far more fragmented than that. So the fact that anyone would come together, even bigger, because the thing is, like, if you were like, to ask, like,
how is this even a point in his favor? Like Qadianis, the ulama came together to get it stated in the Constitution that Qadianis aren't Muslim. Okay, that's great. This statement has nothing to do with that. This statement is not opposition. It's not a political opposition to the alphabet people. That's the main criticism of this document. It has nothing to do with what ulama did in Pakistan to, get Qadianis declared as non-Muslim. That's actual political opposition. That is political opposition. What you guys are doing is blocking political opposition because you're saying we respect their constitutional rights and we want to live in harmony with them. Did the ulama of Pakistan come and say we want to live in harmony with Qadianis? We want to live in peaceful coexistence with Qadianis. Did they actually say that? No. They oppose them politically. So for those of you who are just joining, this is Hamza Maqbool, one of the helpers of Compassionate Imams. This was a statement that he recorded defending the Navigating Differences document, and he's just rambling on every single issue, but contradicting himself by these claims.
There's a document that says being gay is haram. You'd be like, surprise, surprise. What do you want? Like a Nobel Prize, Sherlock? We all know that. Even the people who say it's not, they all know it. It's a baseline assumption from which even they start their discussions, because we all know it's true. In some ways, even more amazing is what? That 300 people who have to compete with each other for masjid positions, for the speaker positions at conferences, to get views and hits on social media, to get invitations and sponsorships and honoraria and all of these other things that literally will undercut one another for the most petty and stupid of things that I've seen it happen. But this one time they put it aside for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to do this one thing and to say the haqq. It's a big deal. some of the signatories to that document, by the way, are actually university professors. Do you know how imperiled they are in their livelihood and how imperiled they are in their health and even maybe safety and well-being?
I thought everyone who signed is a scholar or, has some scholarly credential. Isn't that what you just said? But, they're a professor. So I guess these are scholarly professors like Jonathan Brown, right? Who's one of the signatories, who's risking so much. He's risking so much by signing this document. Oh, my God. Saying gay sex is haram. Oh, there are only two genders. So it's such a big risk. The professor, who is also somehow scholarly, some kind of alim, right? Has some alim credential, according to what he just said a few minutes ago.
Something like this. And some of them are people who mouthed off and said really dumb things in the past, in my opinion.
Oh, they did?
But you know what? Everyone, what you say, you can give them a charitable interpretation. I'm actually inclined to give them a charitable interpretation right now. Why? Maybe they didn't mean it as badly as I thought that they meant it when they said it. Why?
Oh, you thought it was really bad when they
Because
originally said it, right?
Something on the line for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. I don't see that they're going to get any benefit other than something otherworldly through this.
No benefit.
Because last I checked, ever since the era of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, even the early era of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Ummah doesn't seem to treat its people who speak the truth very well. Starting with Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu and then going onward. Doesn't seem to
criticism of Sahaba?
Priority to that. All that dependably. It does happen, but it's not all that dependable. So mashallah. And then on the flip side, I've seen people who are literally imams. They sit in the masjid only with their own disciples. They don't even have to talk to someone of a different madhab, much less of a different firqa or of a non-Muslim or a hostile academic, liberal or whatever, conservative, whatever it is. And they still won't sign it. So they'll put them aside.
People aren't signing it. People aren't signing it because they're sectarian. This is what he's saying. People are not signing this document. Whoever doesn't sign it is being sectarian. Just put them aside.
They didn't have tawfiq. Inshallah,
they
they'll
didn't have
collaborate
tawfiq
in their own way some other time. Allah judges people. I don't care. But at least if we don't want to speak ill of people, at least those people who did make a sign, you should recognize it's a big deal.
Well, big deal.
It is
Congratulate
a big deal.
them.
It's something that should have some sort of honor and ihtiram.
Oh, honor,
and
ihtiram.
As people who are not, who are not in those circles and don't have to argue those arguments, debate those debates, fight those fights.
Wow.
We should also give some sort of support to those people who are amenable to working with one another. That we don't have to get together and make a document that says that you cannot say Ameen out loud in the Salat or that you have to say Ameen out loud in the Salat. Right? No. But those things that have to do with the life and death of our Ummah and the life and death of our community, we can get together and do those things, say those things, so that a time doesn't come, right? This state isn't there yet, but there are states in the Union that are already there where the school can start gender reassignment transitioning for your child without informing you, much less getting consent from you. That if you tell them no, they have the right to take you away because you're endangering the child's welfare on some sort of like a mental health argument. It's gonna keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
Oh, it is?
And to say what happens,
Imam Tom doesn't think so. Imam Tom doesn't think it's going to get worse and worse. It's, only people who have no clue about history would think it's going to get worse and worse. You have Roe v. Wade that was overturned. So I think Maqbool needs to go take lessons from Tom.
In your feelings and you expressing yourself, it's a document that will be used in legal settings and in corporate settings and in institutional settings. If you're saying this is not, it's not hard, it's very compromised. Of course, we started the talk saying we're compromised by being here. You compromised the day you came here. If you were born here or if you came against your will, you are compromised. Whether it's your fault or not, you are compromised by staying here. You might be compromised by being in a Muslim country in different ways. But there is a compromise. Nobody's Allah that you can stand up and say, no, I'm going to like everybody and like zap everybody with their fingers. The Sulh of Hudebia, the Prophet ﷺ, how did he write the Sulhnama? Was it a genuine expression of the sentiments of the Muslims? No. Affligate person.
So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, that's their go-to, from the beginning, from day one, from 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. And everyone's compromised. Everyone is as compromised as we're compromised. Everyone is, You're accusing me of being compromised. Well, guess what? You're compromised too. So, what is this? The two quo fallacy. So, yeah. Okay. Last clip, or almost the last clip.
He told them to do that. You're telling me that until I write in the thing, die faggot, die, you're somehow compromised?
Whoa, dude. We're... I didn't hear that part. So we're going to get problems with this kind of language. Anyway, hold on.
One thing, what happened with me is that I'll write a sonata. He told them to do that. But the point is, whatever, if it's wrong, I won't speak against it if what's in it is right. If, on the other hand, you want to actually make progress, you actually want to live in the real world, you want to acknowledge your realities, and you want to do something to safeguard yourself and be a beacon of hope for other people, because people in this country, they know that this is all silliness, this is nonsense. The man himself, who's walking around in a dress, insisting that people call him a woman, himself knows that he's not a woman. Forget about anybody else. They don't understand how to cope with these traumas that they have, with their experiences with the church, with their experience with repressive governments, with their experiences in their own history. They don't have a sharia to fall back on. They don't have words that have definitions to them. They don't know. They don't have any of these things. The ummah, people are looking to the ummah to be a beacon of hope and light and understanding for them, so that they can understand these things and work through them. And already, just days the document was signed, from the Catholic Church, from evangelical pastors, from academics who are fair-minded. They're saying, we're discussing your document in our circles, and we're thinking about writing something like this, or we stand with you, or we, why? Because these are things that we did. It's a big deal. The ulama, they complain and they cry about their irrelevance. Why? Someone in academia will say something like the Kaaba, the word Kaaba doesn't refer to Makkah Mukarramah, but it's actually a Quickie Mart in Crown Point, Indiana. And, because this word means this in Syriac. They say something, they write something, we have to deal with the consequences. This is the first time in my recollection that the ulama did something. They're the ones who are in the driver's seat. They drove some sort of change. Now the academics are all scrambling. Some are saying that this is reasonable. Some are saying that it's not. They're debating, negotiating with one another. How are we going to cope with this? Now you're going to tell me afterward that this is, you're going to have all these objections about it. It's fine. It's not I myself say it's not a optimally worded document. Why? Because compromise requires that nobody thinks it's optimally worded, but in order to get everybody on board, certain things have to be changed, as long as it's not so substantive that it actually puts us into sin or takes us out of the deen, or it takes away from what the underlying point is that needs to be made. That's kind of how compromise works. Or what do you want? Do you want us to all have civil war? As Muslims, that Salafi is fighting Sufi, and Hanafi and Shafi'i and Maliki are fighting each other, and Shia is fighting Sunni. One thing.
What is he talking about? What is he talking about? SubhanAllah. So, yeah, it's very difficult to listen to him. SubhanAllah. Yeah, just have to recover from that. But the last part was bizarre. Like, talking about sectarianism, talking about, what did he say? Like,
he told them that it actually, or as Muslims, that Salafi is fighting Sufi works. Or what do you want? Do you want us to all have civil war? Puts us into sin or takes us out of the deen?
Oh yeah, so he says that it's compromise, so you have to word it in a way to get people to sign it. So this is what I've been saying. This is exactly what I've been saying. It's compromised. It's a document that's compromised on issues that cannot be compromised on. That is the main critique. And they're acknowledging that. They acknowledge that, yeah, that is, we do have to compromise, but it's okay to do so. So, yeah, I mean, sorry I subjected you guys to that, but this is like what I have to deal with. There's also the last part of this whole thing. Hopefully I can play it for you. Just 1 second.
Complain and make the end in fitna. I would have done it. And you get it, you're like, no, I wanted it. I realized, no, I don't really want unity. I want to see this person destroyed, trust me, I totally relate. I totally relate. I would be a liar if I said I didn't. But alhamdulillah, Allah gave everybody a brain, gave everybody a mental, a rational faculty that you have to work hard in order to make it dominant over your emotions. Because emotionally, I totally see that like desire to destroy people, like screwed me over in the past or have been betrayed some portion of the trust of the deen. Alhamdulillah, put it aside. This is a good thing. It's a win. Inshallah, let's work together for these things in the future. Let's work with people that we're able to work with. Don't let people make a fool of you. Don't let people use you. Go in with your eyes open. But sometimes there are those times when people do put aside their differences and they do work for the better. It's happened in the history of Islam, and it's always been great barakah from it. Sometimes one good deed, you'll see that generations will eat and drink from the barakah of that for hundreds of years afterward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq of looking for these things and finding these things and asking for them so that He can give them to us and inoculate us from being those people who are completely 100% benefit proof and barakah proof and nur proof and aql proof to the point that we actually hate those things and it becomes untenable afterward. It just becomes just irrational afterward. It's a punishment in and of itself in this world, and the punishment of the hereafter is worse. And again, there are people who have substantive objections to the document that are well articulated. I'm not talking about that. I myself have my own objections. I'm one of the drafters, one of the 4 drafters. There's 300 signatories, only four initial drafters. I'm one of them. I myself have objections, would have worded certain things differently. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm just saying that, politically, this is not with me. And so I'm just going to deprecate it over and over again, just, in a way that has no rational bounds, that proposes no reasonable alternative, and that has no sort of other benefit that's tangibly perceivable by intelligent people. Allah Ta'ala protect us from that dogmatic antagonism. This is Islam.
Yeah.
It's fulfilled part of the mandate.
So that's his statement. He acknowledges at the end that he's one of the initial 4 drafters. So anyway, may Allah guide him and guide us. It would be great if just like being hard on halal meat and moon sighting, mashallah, those are great things. But can you also be, strict and hard on these major issues of deen? Let's see some of that. Inshallah. But yeah. Okay. So I'll just answer any questions that you have and we'll wrap it up a few minutes. But try to keep it on the topic. Yeah, Genius of Islam, episode 4 being worked on. Still being worked on. Why is the Dawah Mafia criticizing Khilafah? That's a good question. Because they believe in this idea of Muslims being a permanent minority, basically. So here's a good. I was told by someone who knows Omar Suleiman personally that he is not pro-LGBT. Is this true? It depends on what you mean by pro-LGBT. Do you mean that he supports, does he think that gay sex is halal? No, he doesn't think that. He said it very clearly multiple times. But does he think that we should ally with LGBT groups? Yes, he says that explicitly. So that's being pro-LGBT. Does he think that Muslims should support LGBT rights? Well, there's a document on his website for years, 5 years or more, advocating for exactly that. So That's being pro-LGBT. Are these people considered outside of Islam? Nope. I mean, that's not my position to make that kind of judgment, because there's a lot of ta'wil that can be made on what they're exactly saying. But is it something batil? Is it something that's leading to misguidance? Is it something that's causing confusion and deviance? Yes, we can say that unambiguously. If I could give any positive advice to Omar Suleiman, what would it be? I've already given him positive advice. I've said it very clearly multiple times. You have to renounce these positions that you've had in the past, and you have to advocate for their opposite. You have to denounce these rights, Qawmlut rights. You have to denounce allyship. You have to say that you were wrong. Say that these kinds of allyships are completely impermissible. Like, that would be a good start. Do I feel isolated? And would your work benefit from teaming up with others in the Dawah sphere? No, I don't feel isolated. I feel like most people are getting it. There's a lot of people who support what we're saying, especially on this recent Harmony with Qawmlut document. There's a lot of support. Recently, Hamza Zortzis made a statement denouncing the document as well, and giving a very harsh condemnation. Like, here's what Hamza Zortzis said. Now let's look at his tweet. So Hamza Zortzis says, here are my reflections. I express them with a dedication to everyone's well-being. It comes from a place of brotherly love. Notwithstanding the perceived positives of the recent statement, we also need to be honest. Many of the Muslim leaders, imams, scholars, and preachers in the West, particularly in the US, sided with the liberal left. They made terrible, weak, short-term, and uninformed decisions. There was hardly any direct dawah in their dialogues and any attempt to show the ideological, intellectual, and moral superiority of Islam. It was not prioritized. In an ideological context, if you're not giving dawah, they are giving dawah, quote unquote, to you. Unfortunately, due to relative silence and a passive strategy, they succeeded. This recent statement was not a huge success. It is damage limitation. It is an attempt to pick up the broken pieces created by a failed strategy that has been implemented for over a decade. So that's a pretty strong denunciation of the statement and everyone who's involved. He's like denouncing these leaders, quote unquote, making uninformed decisions, weak, defeatist. So I don't feel alone. I think the majority understands the problem here with these compassionate imams. I think the pressure has gotten so much that they felt compelled to make this kind of statement. And as I mentioned in that previous stream, they're doing damage control. So when you were working with Yakin back then, were they holding the same stance, or this is the reason you walked out from Yakin? So when I was a part of Yakin, I think I was their first hire. If not the first, maybe the second. I was their first director of research. And I was brought on by Omar Suleiman. Personally, he brought me on. I didn't know of him before. I didn't have any interactions with him before, but he reached out and he recruited me for this director position. And part of being in that position was to address sources of doubt that caused doubt in Islam. That was Yakin's whole mandate, and they wanted me to come on and address these doubts that are caused by liberalism, right? So after coming on, it's a long story with a lot of details, but I have to clarify these details because you have people affiliated with Yakin who are spreading all kinds of lies about my involvement with Yakin at that time. So I am forced by them to clarify and clear my name, basically. So Yakin Institute, this was the whole mandate, to address these sources of doubts, and part of the doubts that were identified was LGBT related issues, was feminism, was these kinds of liberal ideological stances that conflict with Islam. But despite that being the whole reason for me to join, they told me no. There's no talking about this. There's no writing about this. Stop criticizing feminism. And I said no. Like, I am going to address these issues. I am going to criticize some of these people, some of these groups, some of these. The term compassionate imam wasn't there yet, but I have to criticize some of these feminist activists, especially. So this was around 2016. And I didn't know, like, their position. I could have guessed, but their position is, allying with, working with, going to these marches and holding hands. I didn't know that was their position. Like, they hadn't done anything like that I was aware of at that point. But I could have guessed that. So that's bad on me. I didn't. I drank the Kool-Aid, unfortunately. That's my mistake. I have no problem admitting that. But it became very clear. They made it very clear that, Daniel, you can't write about these issues and be associated with us. Be associated with Yakin. We can't even have your name on the site because you're criticizing our allies, people like Linda Sarsour. You're criticizing insiders, people who are insiders. I'll explain what that means one day to you guys. But this is not acceptable. And I said, well, you guaranteed when I joined Yakin Institute and I moved my family across the country, you guaranteed that you wouldn't censor me. You knew exactly what I was about. You knew exactly what I say and what I write. And you said, no problem. We won't necessarily agree with everything that you say, but you have the right to speak. You have your own dawah. You have the right. And we'll just have this disclaimer, that you're your own person, basically. So that was your guarantee to me. And now you're saying, no, you can't speak on these issues at all. So this is a violation of the promise that you made. And they acknowledged, Omar Suleiman acknowledged, yeah, we can't keep that promise. So that's the parting of ways with Yakin Institute. And I can give you a lot more details. I can give you a lot more receipts. So every time, like, one of these Yakin bots makes a claim about me and my involvement with Yakin Institute, I will bring these receipts publicly. I'll bring these recordings publicly, like what they have said to me in these meetings with me, to clear my name. So Omar Suleiman, Tom, you're over there. Tell your bots to stop goading me on with these false claims about my involvement with Yakin Institute, because I will bring the receipts, and I'm doing you a favor by not, spilling all the details. I'm trying to preserve the amana, basically. I'm trying to preserve the amana. That's the only reason that I don't show all of these receipts about what my involvement with Yakin was, So I have to just clear my name and say, yeah, I was involved with Yakin. They hired me. I was their first director. And I had high hopes for what Yakin Institute could accomplish as a legitimate Islamic think tank. But it became very clear within a month, 2 months, that this is not what they actually want to do. It's not a, look at a review. Read the Yakin review and all of the stuff that they were pushing out after I left. And while I was there, it was a conflict. You're publishing an article that in Islam, jihad is only defensive. Like, I was like, what is this trash? Like, how could you publish this? How could you and I didn't approve of this. I didn't give my stamp of approval for this article that you're publishing. This doesn't address doubts. This is all apologetic nonsense that is distorting the Islamic tradition, misquoting the Islamic tradition. This trash article by Justin Parrott. And yeah. So, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. But I was long gone. Like, I wasn't at Yakin for 6 full months. Like, it was barely even like 4 months. And yeah, even those 4 months was extremely difficult and contentious. So, yeah. Okay, so I don't want to get to 4 hours stream, so I'll just 15 minutes before the 4-hour mark. We're gonna have to cut it short, but inshallah, we have a lot of good content that's coming up. Oh, the one thing I would want to read real quick, if there were any super chats. So give me a second. Because I didn't check. Maybe there's one. Oh, subhanAllah, this was a huge super chat. May Allah bless you, your family, and your team, and their families. This is from Nexhip. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you, brother, for this very generous donation. Barakallahu feek. Really appreciate it. Yeah, make dua for me, guys. Make dua for the entire Muslim Skeptic team. I've been very busy with a lot of different projects. I've been traveling, but we have debates coming up. Some very substantive, important debates. I'm debating a reformist, Muslim reformist academic. That's coming up June 23rd. It's like a marathon debate. It's going to be over 5 hours, inshallah. And it's going to have a follow-up debate the very next day. That's going to be like 2.5 or 3 hours. So that's coming up. And then I debate a Christian. I debate an Orthodox Christian. If you guys know Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer is Orthodox Christian and on YouTube. So I'm going to debate him, inshallah, on which religion best represents the prophets. Is it Islam or Christianity? So that's going to be a fire debate, inshallah. That's coming up. And I might debate an atheist later in the year as well. So a lot of exciting debates. We're still working on Genius of Islam. We have our course, Liberal Mind Control, at Al-Asna, that you can always join. We have, if you want to learn more about fiqh of tahara, we have Navigating the Cycles, another course that is being taught by a sheikha or an alima, ustadha, for Al-Asna Institute. Take that class, Navigating the Cycles. Go to alasna.org. Yeah, and appreciate everyone watching this very long stream. I wanted to keep it under 2 hours, but as you guys know, I talk too much. So, barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan, and we'll catch you on the next one, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.